my master's there, so I was
Alright.
driving.
Okay. So you went to school at Central, okay.
I didn't stay on campus. No, I was a non-traditional
But
student.
did you take classes on campus?
Yeah, for my MBA, yeah. We had to go to Brown Hall.
Oh, you have an MBA, okay, and you're Granholm?
About 61.
I think you had to do classes.
Yeah. Then
For,
I'll probably see him next, I wouldn't be surprised next.
Okay.
I teach 3 of those classes.
And I will open it and start the.
Okay, you want to do that at the very top rather than here? Okay. Okay. Go ahead.
Good evening, folks. We're going to start the meeting here in just a few minutes. You can grab your seat and we can get started on time.
I'd like to welcome everyone to the October 22nd, 2025 Zoning Board of Appeals meeting and ask that our secretary call the roll.
Atlas? Here. McGuire? Here. Powell?
Here.
Trustman?
Here.
DeMarith?
Here.
Orlick?
Here.
At this point, we are going to move into, we have a quorum. And I'd like to start out by just, I got some feedback here on my phone. Let me get this. All this technology. I want to welcome our 2 new members to the board. Ms. Latricia Powell is going to be serving as our regular member. She's all ready to roll. We went through some training here the last couple of weeks, and so we appreciate you coming on board and helping us out here, fill this role out with the board. And then our new board alternate is Miss Hannah DeMarith.
It's pronounced Demarath.
DeMarith, okay. Welcome aboard. We appreciate that.
Thank you.
And I'm sorry, folks, I'm getting feedback on a phone here. I got to get this stopped. Are you on Zoom, Kaylee? You are? I'm going to exit then. All righty. So the next thing on the agenda that we need to do is a little housekeeping stuff is election of our officers. This time we are going to need nominations for a chair.
And let me just explain what's going on here. At this point in the year, oftentimes we will elect officers for the next 14 months. But we're going to have some changes in the board come January. I'm term limited, so I will be off end of December. And we have an opening because the chair who served us for the last 3.5 years had to resign and leave the city for help with the parents. So consequently, we are just going to have an election for 2 months, which is almost pro forma, but we have to do that because there'll be new members on the board come January, and we would obviously like them to be the ones to decide who their officers will be for 2026. So Brian, back to you.
So with that, I'm looking for nominations for chair.
I'd like to nominate Dave McGuire as chair.
Second the nomination, yeah.
Do we have any other nominations? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ready? Dave McGuire will serve as our chair through the end of this year. This time, do we have a nominations for a vice chair?
And Yanni, sir?
Mhm.
I nominate Yanni Havos.
Do we have support?
I second that nomination.
Do we have any other nominations? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We have a new vice chair. At this point, I'm going to turn the meeting over to Mr. McGuire.
Oh. You want to be
I'm gonna
here?
give you a little bit of an outline. We'll give you the gavel.
Yes. And the timer for the 5 minutes. Five minutes for,
We'll walk you through it.
not for the first two, please.
Yeah, I thought it was 3. Okay. So, help me out, Mr. Kench, where?
Yeah, our next item on the agenda is item 4, which is the approval of the agenda.
Okay,
I do have one thing. We have board recognition, and I think given the nature of the meeting, it's going to run long tonight. And we had some things that didn't plan out as we'd hoped. We're going to go ahead and remove that and do that in November. But other than that, that would be the only change.
okay. Apologize. I wasn't necessarily expecting that, so, okay, so, we have public comment.
Nope,
Approval of the agenda.
nope. You're looking for a motion, David, on the approval of the
Oh, the
agenda.
approval of minutes, I'm sorry.
I'll move to approve.
I'll second it.
Okay. All those
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Nope. Motion passes. Now we have public comment, but that is for your public hearing
Yeah, we're gonna approve the minutes first, David.
Yep.
Under item
Gonna do
5.
that.
that we just did that.
Well, that was the agenda.
Agenda.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Approval of the minutes, December 18th, 2024 regular meeting.
I'll move to approve.
Support?
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Minutes are approved. Okay, now we are going to have public comment on
Mhm.
non-hearing related issues. Anything? Okay, thanks.
Yep.
This is the time during the hearing where the floor is open to anyone who wishes to come forward and speak. We typically reserve this time for comments that are not related to a case being presented this evening. After comments close, the public comment portion will, oh, I'm sorry. Anyone wish to come on anything that is not at a public hearing this evening?
None. Yes.
This is just non-case related items. So anything that relates to that case that's before us, don't talk about that here. That'll be later.
Yeah. Okay, seeing no one, we will close the public comment period. Do we have communications?
Nothing then, nothing to share outside of what we'll read through as part of the case later on.
So we have one case to present to the board this evening. Before we begin, I would like to state the board procedures. In accordance with our established bylaws and board procedures, the appellant will be called forward to state their case. Following the appellant's presentation, the public hearing will then be opened. Anyone who wishes to address the board will come forward, sign in, and state their name and address, which will be made part of the permanent record. Each person will be allowed to speak for 5 minutes. In addition, each person will be allowed to address the board only once unless they have new and pertinent information to share. The public hearing will then be closed. Any correspondence received regarding the case will be presented to the board. The board will then enter into discussion. All motions will be made in the positive to avoid confusion. This does not necessarily mean the person making the motion is in favor of the request. It will take 3 positive votes to approve a request. Any request which is denied shall not be brought back to the board for a period of 1 year. The board reserves the right to ask questions of the appellant and at any point throughout the hearing. In the event only 3 voting members are present, the appellant has the right to postpone. We have more than that, so we're fine. Mr. Kench, would you introduce our case?
Mr. Chair, I think you have a,
Yes, Commissioner McGuire, I previously looked over this as a planning commissioner and approved it, and so it's the reason why we're here. So I'm going to recuse myself from this, and you guys have fun, I guess. Yeah.
Mr.
Is
Chair,
there,
I
is there
too
anyone else?
will recuse myself due to a conflict of interest.
Okay. The issue was raised with Mr. Kench. I believe that I may have a conflict of interest. I made a Facebook post posing a question about the property and basically just posed a thoughtful comment. I do not believe I do have any sort of conflict, so I will be sitting here. So, Mr. Kench?
yep, I just wanted to wait for Kaylee here. Alrighty, I'm going to go ahead and introduce the first case. This is an appeal that is coming before us as an approval that was granted by our planning commission. I'm going to read from the report here, so this becomes part of the permanent record. This is case number 2501, which was an appeal filed by Carol Horman along with several neighboring property owners challenging the planning commission's approval of a special use permit identified as SUP 2509 and the associated site plan review SPR 25-05. These approvals authorize the demolition of the existing building on the site and the construction of a new gas station and convenience store. In this appeal, the applicants contend that the public notice for the Public Planning Commission hearing should have extended beyond the 300-foot radius due to the nature of the proposed use. They further assert that the use of Palmer Street for traffic exiting the redevelopment site is inappropriate, that establishing a gas station at this location conflicts with the city's master plan and that such use could introduce potential hazards to the surrounding areas as a basis for the Zoning Board of Appeals to overturn the Planning Commission's approval for the new gas station. Some key things that we focused on in the report, in this case, under the first heading, have master plan versus zoning standards. Asking that the board, in evaluating this appeal, should distinguish between the city's master plan and its zoning ordinance. The city's master plan is a long-range document outlining the community's vision for future development. It is reviewed every 5 years in accordance with the Michigan Planning Enabling Act. The Planning Commission completed its most recent review at a public hearing on August 7th, 2025, and adopted the resolution recommending approval to the city's commission. Approval to the city commission. The city commission will hold the city commission actually held the public hearing on September 8th and adopted the plan on September 22nd. The board should note that while the master plan provides important policy guidance, it is not the regulatory document for the city. The staff report presented to the Planning Commission noted that the subject property falls within the mixed-use medium classification, which permits all uses in the CD4 and the CD5 districts. Under the city's zoning ordinance, a gas station is allowed in the CD4 district where the property is located by a special use permit. The mixed-use medium classification is defined in the 2050 Master Plan in Book 1, page 7. Zoning ordinance, on the other hand, is a legally enforceable set of standards adopted under the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act, PA 33 of 2008, and based on the adopted master plan. These standards define permitted uses, density, building form, and development parameters within each zoning district. And in this case, the project site lies within the CD4 General Urban Character District, which outlines the applicable use and development regulations. Section 1 of our zoning ordinance code provides that in an introduction to the standard, noting that it is a character or form-based code designed to support predictable, context-sensitive planning and the development of walkable, mixed-use, human-scale places. It does so by providing a range of standards for use and other development elements that define a place. In accordance with Section 125-3504 of the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act, it notes that approval of a land use or activity shall be granted if the request is in compliance with the standards stated in the zoning ordinance. The conditions imposed under the zoning ordinance, other applicable ordinances, and state and federal statutes. Thus, the zoning administrator, the planning commission, and the zoning board of appeals must focus on the compliance with the zoning standards and not the broader policy preferences reflected in the master plan as suggested in the appeals application. Under the heading procedural compliance, and all these things are kind of a breakdown of the appeals application here of some of the key elements that I wanted to focus in on. The procedural compliance, public noticing. In accordance with Section 154, 615D, subsection 3 of the city's zoning ordinance and sections 125, 3103, and 3502 of the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act, staff is required to issue public notice for any hearing involving a special use permit. This includes publishing notice in a newspaper of general circulation and mailing notice to property owners within 300 feet of the subject property at least 15 days prior to the hearing. The city, for the Planning Commission hearing record, confirms that notice was published in the Morning Sun. Notices were mailed to all qualifying property owners, and that would be within that 300-foot distance. Notice was also posted at the City Hall, on the city's website, on our social media, and on the subject property. We typically place a small sign that identifies that there's a hearing. Concerns related to Palmer Street. Under this heading, under Section 5 of the appeal, the use of Palmer Street for site access is questioned due to its proximity to the residential properties and the adjacent CD3 zoning district. In response, a copy of the city's Mount Pleasant truck route map provided by the engineering department is included for reference. This map designates Main, Palmer, and University Streets within the project block as the secondary truck routes. Part of the site development process, the planning director worked with the developer to incorporate a right turn only out of that drive onto Palmer Street from the new gas station. which was approved by the Planning Commission. This condition is intended to direct outbound traffic from the new gas station towards Main Street and away from the adjacent residential uses. Staff analysis and recommendation. The staff report prepared by the Planning Director, Manuela Pawadeco, includes a detailed review of all applicable zoning requirements for the proposed project. This report formed the basis for the Planning Commission's decision to approve the SUP 24509 and SPR 25-05. I suggested in the report that you also take an opportunity to review the Planning Commission's video on this case. Hopefully you've been able to do that. The scope of the review by the Zoning Board of Appeals. The Zoning Board of Appeals must determine whether the Planning Commission erred in the approval of the redevelopment. Importantly, the ZBA's review is limited to the materials that were presented to the Planning Commission at the time of its decision. Included in the review packet are the application to the Planning Commission for the special use permit and site plan review, the site plan for the project, interdepartmental communications to the Planning Director, which would include engineering, building department, fire department, and zoning related items that come through the Planning Department. Public letters and comments received, the staff report along with the presentation, approved Planning Commission meeting minutes. Under the conclusion and next steps, we're asking that the board must determine whether the Planning Commission made appropriate findings that the proposed redevelopment satisfies all applicable zoning criteria and regulations. Based on its review of the materials presented at the time of the Planning Commission's decision, the ZBA should state in its finding on the record and file a motion reflecting that determination. And then I note the attachments that we have in the packet. And I apologize, it was a fairly large packet. We're going to go through a lot of these things. One of the things that I want to share with you is the staff report and the staff. Staff report and the presentation. But the next thing that I want to focus on before I move over to the computer there is I want to just review the application that was submitted by the applicant. And I want to let you know that every case that comes before the Planning Commission starts out with pre-application meetings. This process with this site, I understand, took over 2 years, a number of revisions through the engineer, with their engineer and the planning department to get to where she was able to make a recommendation that the site would comply with all the zoning criteria. So under the application, which was submitted by the Chris folks, I'm looking at section 9, which is the review criteria. These are the ordinance requirements that are incorporated into our application. I'm going to go ahead and read what the questions are, and then I'm going to let you read those responses for the record. And then I'm not going to do the same thing when I look at the report, the planning director's report, but we will highlight those things so that you can see that those questions have been addressed as part of that review. So under subsection 154.615B, for details under this section, it says the zoning ordinance imposes the following general requirements on the use requested by the applicant. Under each requirement, the applicant was required to explain in writing and supporting evidence how the proposed use satisfies those requirements. For the requirements where there is a potential for negative and adverse effects, applicant will propose measures to mitigate such effects. Under item 1, the question says, the special use permit or special regulated use shall be one listed in this permitted as a special use, SUP, or special regulated use, SRU, for the district or civil zone in which the property is located, and that the use shall be consistent with the intent and the purpose of the chapter and the objectives of the currently adopted master plan. Applicant's response at the time to the Planning Commission is the subject property is in the CD4 General Urban Zoning District. The use of the property shall be a convenience store and a food mart with the additional use of an automobile filling station. Per table 154, 410A of the city zoning ordinance, the automobile filling stations are permitted in the area through the use of a special use permit. Criteria 2, the special use or special regulated use shall comply with all applicable standards and the requirements of this chapter. The special use or special regulated use shall be operated in a manner that is compatible with surrounding land uses within 300 feet measured to lot line to lot line. Compatibility includes but is not limited to hours of operation and environmental effects, e.g. noise, light, traffic, intensity of use, and density. The applicant's response to this question: special use is compatible with the surrounding land uses, which includes a mixture of commercial uses such as a liquor store, along with residential uses. The special use shall service the needs of the nearby residential areas and include similar operating hours to the nearby liquor store. Additionally, pieces of the project such as fencing to limit light escaping the lot will shield nearby residential areas from environmental effects. The criteria noted under 3 is the applicant should demonstrate how the use is compatible with surrounding land uses. Their response: the special use shall integrate seamlessly into the nearby land uses. The use will complement the existing uses of the CD4 district, which runs along Picker Street and Main Street adjacent to the lot. The use shall serve the needs of the residents in the nearby residential areas in the suburban district by providing the residents of these lots with products they need, such as food, drink, and gasoline. Under criteria 4, the special use or special regulated use shall not interfere with the general enjoyment of the surrounding area determined as adjacent and/or abutting properties, including those properties separated by streets, alleys, or right-of-ways. Their response: the use shall maintain the enjoyment of the surrounding areas by maintaining access to all surrounding areas. A fence line shall separate the nearby residential lot adjacent to the southeast section of the property. The nearby driveways to the residential home and the liquor store on the same block shall be maintained as they are now. Sidewalks shall be maintained and replaced where required to allow access for pedestrians, and the sidewalk to the north shall be replaced to meet streetscape requirements. Under item 5, the applicant shall indicate how the special use or special regulated use shall not have an adverse impact on the surrounding neighborhood within 300 feet of its lot line in regards to traffic, noise, architectural compatibility, hours of operation, light, odors, and the like. Their response: the special use will not have an adverse impact on the surrounding lots. The use shall not restrict movement to nearby businesses such as the liquor store and the USPS. The Postal Service building traffic and will be limited on Palmer Street, so no incoming traffic to the store shall be allowed off Palmer Street. Fencing shall shield the nearby lots from noise and light. Criteria number 6. The special use or special regulated use shall not be hazardous to the adjacent property or involve uses, activities, materials, or equipment which will be detrimental to health, safety, or welfare of persons or property through excessive production of traffic, noise, smoke, odor, fumes, or glare. In their response, they note gasoline shall be stored in sealed underground tanks approved for use by the state of Michigan. Traffic shall not increase significantly as a result of the project, as Pickard and Main are both heavily utilized and no access should be permitted off from Palmer. Fencing shall shield adjacent lots from excessive light. Hours of operation will limit noise at night. Criteria number 7. The special use or special regulated use shall be adequately served by the existing capacity of existing public facilities and services, or it shall be demonstrated that the person responsible for the proposed special use or special regulated use shall be capable to continually provide adequately for the services and facilities deemed essential to the use under consideration. Their response: the store will operate within the existing capabilities of nearby power, sewer, and drinking water utilities. No additional undue stress shall be placed on the utilities with the operation of the store, and all levels of use of these facilities shall be at a standard rate of use to automobile filling stations. An underground stormwater detention system shall be placed on the property to reduce flows into the city's nearby storm sewer system. Under section 154.615D, under item 1, explain how the special use or special regulated use shall not substantially injure the financial value of surrounding properties and shall not hinder or discourage the appropriate development or use of adjacent properties. Their response: the special use shall increase the financial value of surrounding properties. The building on the lot currently sits vacant and is deteriorating. The redevelopment of the site will improve the streetscape along Pickard and update the look of the site to encourage the appropriate development and use of adjacent properties. And lastly, under item 2, the zoning ordinance requires that addressing each of the conditions or requirements for the special use permit, regulated use, or permit as set forth in section 154.410 and section 154.615. Applicant's response: the use shall satisfy all condition and requirements set forth in the special use of the lot in the CD4 General Urban District per the city's zoning ordinance. This includes all requirements and conditions set forth in section 154.410 and section 154.615 of the city's zoning ordinance, specifically for automobile filling stations and special use permits. This includes section 154.410B and section 154.615, along with any further requirements and conditions set forth by the City Planning Commission. And that concludes the response to the questions called for in the zoning. And I'm going to move over to the computer now and share with you the staff report from the planning director, the report, and then also the presentation. A lot of these key questions that we just went through here with the application are there. I'm not going to read them verbatim on that because we already have them, but I want you at least to see the process that they go through to get the report written. Okay. In the packet, I've included everything that was assembled from the Planning Commission packet, which along with the application from the folks making the appeal this evening. I'm going to leave those on the front end of the packet, and I'm going to move into, and as the applicant comes forward on the appeal, we may be able to go back through and reference some of those slides as well. So we went through the application. We get to this section here. Okay, I just read you the response to the criteria outlined in our zoning ordinance in the application. The front end of the application, as always, gives us the pertinent information regarding the zoning classification, parcel code numbers. In this case, there's a number of lots that make up this site. You have the contact information, and then you'll also see an owner's authorization sheet that's in here as well. Those are all standard requirements that come through every application that goes before our planning commission. You'll see that the site area is roughly, well, it's actually 1.17 acres, 50,000 square feet. We get the size of the building and the proposed building as well as the existing building here. It looks like the new building is going to be 6,150, and I believe just above that you'll see that the old building is coming down is 14,000. So it's a little over half of the size that's currently out there now. Application materials, that's basically a checklist for our folks going through our process. And then this is what I just read to you. And I'm going to go through and show you how the planning director takes that information and incorporates that into a staff report for the decision-making process before our planning commission. Okay, there's our signature page. One thing that we have in here too is our phase 1 environmental. This is a pretty standard thing that you would see on a redevelopment project, exploring on what's out there, what's taking place with that on that site, and it gives you quite a bit of history on this as well. You'll note that in the minutes they are talking with the phase 1 gets started, phase 2. I'll let the applicant to the planning, actually the Chris folks talk a little bit about that on the next steps. But they recognize there's some contamination on the site, and they will be responsible for the cleanup on this as well. So I'm going to move into, you have the site plan, and I'm going to take it to the staff report. So the staff reports basically inventories everything regarding this process. That takes into a lot of the things that took place with our pre-application meeting that the applicant has been able to respond to, and then we inventory there again, tax ID numbers, zoning classification, any special requirements. We get our future land use designation in here, which is the mixed use medium, which we talked about in the staff report. The request at the time was a special use permit and site plan review for a gas station and convenience store. It was currently noted as a vacant building. We have our applicant, property owner's name, and there again, we're looking at the site area. We typically identify in our map locations. That's typically shared with every case. Photos of the site with current conditions. The top one is the view along Palmer Street. I think there's 3 or 4 fairly large overhead doors. This was once, it looks like a repair shop, auto repair shop, and warehousing. And so there's some fairly large doors under that overgrowth there. Photo down below is the open parking area that you can see along Pickard Street. So in the staff report, we typically give them background on the case. As you can see, we inventory the land uses. Future land use, what it's being currently used for, and then what our zoning is allowing. So we have properties that are across the street that are zoned industrial, but everything else, with exception to the west, which is the post office, is located in the CD4. The CD4 does allow for a lot of different types of uses, from the convenience stores, the gas stations, single family homes. So it's a mixture. So here's where we want to focus on, which was the special use criteria for the gas station itself, the things that I just went through in the application. And in here, the planning director is identifying whether these are consistent with our zoning. The only issue that we see here, there was a condition on the lighting, and because we have our photometric plan in here, our city code, chapter 96, restricts lighting to residential properties from commercial developments to no more than a ½ candle. And our photometrics show that they can comply. We've asked for one step further in having them verify that ahead of final inspection on the building, just to make sure that those conditions are accurate. And if by chance they're not, they'll have to make some adjustments to the lighting. The applicants demonstrated how it's compatible with surrounding uses. Yep, check. And then any special conditions, curb cuts. This is where we talk about the right turning only. There's no servicing of vehicles. Typically, we get a gas station. Are there other accessory type uses that would take place? If they are, those are regulated differently, or regulated further, I should say. That's not the case here. It's a convenience store with the gas pumps. And we identify gasoline pumps, water and air hoses, vehicular access pumps, driveways leading. Here again, everything complies with our standards. You have the lot occupation requirements that are in our ordinance. Buildings have to be a certain width based on lot width. They have to have a certain amount of glass depending on the facade and the relationship to public streets. We have proper setbacks that have to be met based on our district standards. And you can see here on the front setbacks, 0 to 20 feet. And it looks like along Palmer Street, we're actually going to get a 20-foot setback where it's currently about 3 or 4 feet. The setback along Main Street is going to be 20 feet. So we're going to actually get some yards in these areas that we don't have currently. The side, which would be along I believe that would be our, to the west, a 70-foot setback to the building. And then the rear is 175 feet, depending on, this is our rear setback. Because this has frontage on 3 sides, our rear setback is actually to Pickard Street, okay? We get the flexibility in making that adjustment. One of the things that through the pre-application meeting that we focused on was the placement of the building. And the building, by putting it where it's currently located, actually helps screen the service areas, the pumps from the residential areas. That's one of the reasons that Palmer was designated as the front in this case. Ceiling height, 25 feet is max. We're at approximately 11 feet. Facade build out, which is 60% of the lot width, that meets. Staff was able to give a partial waiver on that to get that brought into compliance. And there again, we were limited on trying to keep the yards and trying to keep the driveways. Entrances are off the main end, which entrance at the principal frontage and location of the building, parallel to frontage lines. All these things here coming directly out of the zoning and are verified during the review process, okay? Facade voids, which is our windows, we're looking at 70% openings. They exceed all that as far as the window relationship to the walls. Shop frontage, 12-inch to 24 knee walls required at frontage line, which we have. Roof types, flat hip gable roof permitted. They are able to comply there as well. We have building types identified in our zoning code, and this is identified as commercial building type. Encroachments on this site, the only encroachments we're going to have is some landscaping. We have our parking standards that are here. The code does not require minimum parking spaces, but based on the numbers that are on site, they have a certain percentage that have to meet ADA requirements, which they were able to do. Bicycle parking is mandated under our zoning, and they provided that near the pedestrian access off from Palmer Street. Private landscaping that will be accommodated through this process, and then along with the streetscape. We talked about the screening. Parking is required, or parking on site is required to be screened, and they chose to do that with landscaping as opposed to fencing. Signs, there's signs shown in the application, but they are just illustrations at this point. They have not been approved. In fact, the signs that they have here, we're not able to approve under our zoning. So those are typically deferred submittals, and they will be part of the final review, and permits will be issued for that work as well. Lighting, we talked about the lighting being a condition of the approval. We're asking for that next step to have the engineer verify that those conditions can be met, to that 0.5 foot candles of lighting spill over onto adjoining properties. And based on that, pre-application meetings and the revisions, the planning director was able to make a recommendation for the planning commission to approve the SUP and the site plan. And then I'm going to share with you the planning commission, just the, it's kind of some redundancies, but I want you to see that we've went through the application, we've went through the staff report, and then a presentation is given by the planning director. All of these things are consistent with the requirements based on the zoning ordinance, okay? So there again, our initial slide is going to talk about all the mandatory requirements, you know, tax ID numbers, addresses, lot area, those types of things. You see the map again that was included in the report, and you see some photos that had been outlined in the report as well in the presentation to the Planning Commission. General standards, these are all things that she had pulled out of the report, shared with the board, and they're again using this as a checklist. Do they meet this criteria? Yes, they meet the requirements, and she's went down through there and listed the conditions that would have to be satisfied. And that's not uncommon to have certain conditions in a planning commission approval where they can approve it and we verify those things. Landscaping plans, photometric plans for lighting, those types of things. Okay. And then there again, the specific requirements, and those are outlined in 410 subsection B4. You have the site plan that was approved on the top. There again, we have a right turn only on that drive coming out onto Palmer. They're again trying to get service vehicles coming out there, going back to Main Street and then Main to Pickard. And then the primary access is for vehicles coming in for filling, gas station fill-ups, those types of things to the pumps would be coming off of Main and Pickard Street. You have the initial photometric plan that's down in the bottom. It's very small, but there's numbers in there that tells us how much lighting is at moving through that lot, and then what it ends up with at the property line. And on that west property line is critical because that's where we have an existing single family home. You have the elevations. There again, we don't have an architectural standard, but we do have a standard that talks about building height, massing, which talks about the percentage of build out along the lot lines, percent of window openings, the relationship to the facade or the building elevations. And this building is going to be slightly smaller than the buildings that's out there. Which part? You guys hear me? Okay. That's what we need. And then we had a utility shed that are on this site that they talk about trash. And then our site plan review. There again, we're going to inventory all our setbacks. We're going to inventory building size. We're going to look at, again, all the information that is located in 410 in the CD4 district for the building itself. Okay. There again, these are redundant information. These are just in a different format. These were the slides that were presented to the Planning Commission for approval. Okay. Under the public comments, there were 64 letters received during that case in opposition. Those were delivered on June 5th, 2025. Letters were sent by email to the planning commissioners. Letters have been placed on the dais. And then the planning director goes through on her analysis. There again, this is all outlined in the report, consistent information. And then the recommendation, there again, consistent information with the report. Okay. This is the 300-foot mailing list. Satisfy the state requirements and our local requirements. We take this from our GIS and we generate the mailing list here. And all these folks here would have received a letter identifying that there was going to be a hearing and the date and time that would be scheduled if they had questions and who to contact. And that would be the public hearing notice. This was the concern using Palmer Street. And this is our map from the engineering department. And you can see roads that are identified in blue are our primary truck routes. Anything that's listed in orange is secondary truck routes. University, Palmer to Maine are identified as secondary truck routes. Okay. And then you had the minutes from that meeting that you were able to review. And then you have copies of all the letters that had been sent in. I think that takes me to the end. And I'll ask if there's any questions.
Let me just follow up on what you had there, the truck routes and all the previous slide, Brian. Because in going over the case file and everything that everybody has submitted, the one thing I noted was a discrepancy between the two parties. One party indicates that they felt that this was a designated truck road, which I suspect under our terminology means a secondary truck route.
It is.
And the other party indicated that they did not think that to be the case. So with that clear discrepancy in the material that we had to read, I just wanted to clarify that for the record from you as to what Palmer Street there really is.
Yeah, that section of Palmer Street from University to Maine is a secondary truck route. It's appropriate use for vehicles servicing this development.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
If it is a rental, is it both the landowner and the rental the tenant that are informed?
We
With it.
typically send out to, we send out to both.
Both, okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Any other questions? A lot of information. I went through it. Like I say, that the application, staff report, basically we're making sure that they comply with our standards. And then the staff report and the presentation, those are all shared with our planning commission as part of their decision-making process. Okay? All right, we'll leave it there.
Thank you.
Mhm.
So,
We'll have the applicant come forward now.
yes, the applicant may come forward and present their case.
I need a step ladder to get up on this.
Did you? Okay.
Yeah, it can go down.
Oh, no, it's okay. I'm gonna have to,
Lovely.
I'll make do.
Cause I can move it
I'll
down.
make do. Thanks. Good evening, everyone. My name is Kathy Martin. I live at 401 East Palmer Street. And this is Carol Horman, and she lives at 113 East Palmer, right next to the property that we're going to talk about tonight. You can't hear? Is this better? See if I can push this back.
Turn the gain up on it.
Yeah.
Carol's the primary petitioner, but I'm speaking on behalf of Carol and her children because she's not real comfortable with public speaking. And I'm also speaking on behalf of the many residents of the Old North End who have joined as members on this appeal. Little history. On June 3rd, a group of neighbors who live nearby this property, corners of Pickard, Main, and Palmer, learned of a plan to build a Christ gas station on the corner. We also learned that there was to be a hearing on June 5th where our city planning commission was voting on and presumably planned to approve Christ's application for a special use permit that would allow them to go ahead and build a gas station and convenience store in our residential neighborhood. This was quite a shock to many of us because none of us had received any kind of prior notice. To be fair, the rules only require notice of such addresses to be given to homeowners living within 300 feet of the property. Carol did receive a notice, but was entirely unsure of what she could do to intervene. And she had hoped that nearby neighbors might step up, but she really didn't realize she was the only one who would receive that notice out of all of the people that are opposed. And according to a survey of a lot of those neighbors, they said they didn't get a letter. So I don't know. If it got mailed, they should have gotten it. So none of the neighbors had seen the notice that supposedly had been posted in May in the Morning Sun. Heck, very few of us even get the Morning Sun anymore, much less read every square inch. So we missed it there. None of us remembered seeing a sign on the property advising of the hearing. Where was it put again? How long was it up? How big was it? Because none of us remember seeing the sign. Shoot, I remember when Tony Kulik used to plaster signs all over the properties that were involved with something like this. But regardless, I'm sure that the planning director had to have followed the requirements, even if only by the absolute minimum required. But when you got your mind set on making a deal like this, I guess you're not going to go out of your way to inform the surrounding residents of a plan to build a gas station in their neighborhood. I mean, why would you do that? Outside of common courtesy and for the sake of full disclosure to those that would be directly affected, no, let's just keep this on the down low and quietly slide this through before anyone is the wiser. And for many of us, this felt like some sort of a backdoor deal lacking transparency. I mean, if all the nearby residents had been fully informed of this plan, just as a simple courtesy, considering the nature of what was supposed to be going in, is it possible some of them might object? The answer is yes, of course. I mean, it's not like it was a dance studio or a dental office being planned. In that case, notifying everyone within 300 feet would be quite sufficient. But building a gas station in our residential neighborhood, who possibly might object? Well, in less than 2 days, we had collected 64 letters of objection from the neighbors who lived 301 feet and beyond that property. And the letters were submitted to the Planning Commission prior to the hearing on June 5th. The June 5th hearing was attended by many residents of our neighborhood. 8 speakers voiced concerns and objections which ranged from the toxic dangers of gasoline byproducts and the risk it posed to our health and safety, the increase in pass-through traffic, the increase in noise, the increase in air and light pollution, the decrease of our property values, and to the overall disruption that this would cause to our neighborhood. Plus, it really wasn't consistent with the city's master plan. During the meeting, Commissioner Ortman stated, per law, their job as the Planning Commission is to make sure their decision was based on whether the proposal does or does not meet compliance, and that decisions are not made on personal opinion. Commissioners Havelis and Kingsworthy both stated this proposal meets the criteria and standards for approval. Commissioner Havelis reiterated that their job is to ensure compliance. A vote was called to support the approval of granting Chris Doyle a special use permit in the associated site plan review. There were several small stipulations involving signage and lighting, but other than that, it was declared that Chris' plan met all 7 criteria required to be approved. And it was not a unanimous vote, but it still passed. Following this meeting, the Planning Commission staff report, which is the official record of the meeting, was submitted by Manuela Pavadeco, Director of Planning and Community Development, and the report included an analysis that stated the proposed plan is consistent with future land use identified in the master plan. We'll go back to this later. Several recommendations were made, including some that outlined minor conditions like landscaping, lighting, waste management. But we would like to point out that under public comments in this report, page 2, it states, no comment. No comments, really. No mention of the 64 letters of opposition from residents of the neighborhood. No mention of the numerous residents who expressed their concerns about the negative effects on the health, safety, and well-being that would result from a gas station being built in our residential neighborhood, or the increase in traffic that would happen, or the risk to the Chippewa River. Apparently, our concerns warranted little consideration because to report there was no public comment kind of lets us know where we stand in importance to getting a gas station built in our neighborhood. We find this unacceptable. Sorry, I've got a paw that doesn't work. Awesome. Prior to this meeting, we had not seen Chris' proposal or their site plan or their answers to how they met each of the 7 criteria. Over the next few days, we learned how to get a copy of the proposal submitted by Chris. We also learned that for a fee, we could file an appeal with the zoning board. We would be required to provide specific reasons why we believe the Planning Commission erred in their decision to approve this special use permit. Carol was pretty relieved to discover that there are a number of her neighbors that were ready to help, and we're going to be behind her with it. But the financing was a bit of a stumbling point because none of us in that neighborhood are wealthy. But as a group, we were able to take up collection, and through donations from many neighbors, we raised the $200 needed to file the appeal. With group effort, we were able to collect and submit the solid evidence and information needed to support our belief that, for many reasons, this special use permit should not have been granted. On June 26, 2025, an appeal was filed on behalf of Carol and the Old North End neighbors. Our hearing has been rescheduled multiple times since we first started. We appreciate the ZBA's diligence in working to seat an adequate number of members to hear this case. Thank you. So here we are, finally. Now we are going to ask that you listen carefully tonight with an open mind and that you set aside any preconceived notions that you may already have had regarding this property. Our statements are not subjective, like some people have suggested. They are not just our opinions. Our statements are based on factual evidence and the laws that govern these issues. And let's be honest, none of us are likely to randomly do a deep dive into all of the ordinances, statutes, standards, and other city regulations that everyone is expected to adhere to. Oh, and let's not forget the master plan, because that's also very important. So in order to understand what we were dealing with, we had to do a lot of research and a lot of reading, a lot of consulting with experts, and we needed to know specifically what the rules were so that we could all be working from the same metrics, the same definitions, and the same accepted standards. Going forward, we all need to be on the same page. And with all due respect, I'm betting that some of our city planners and board members probably have not read all these regulations in their entirety, because there is a lot, a whole lot. And that could cause a person's decision-making or understanding to be based on personal opinion or on prior experience. So it's easy to see how a misunderstanding could happen. In order to avoid that tonight, we thought it might be helpful to just cite those regulations that apply here. This is important because our appeal is based on everyone knowing what the actual regulations state, including legal citations where applicable. First of all, we want to point out that prior to taking office, each member of the Planning Commission and the Zoning Board and the City Commission are all required to take an oath of office. And as part of that oath, they swear that they will support the charter of the City of Mount Pleasant and will faithfully discharge the duties of this office on behalf of all the citizens of the city to the best of their ability. And in so swearing to support the charter of the City of Mount Pleasant, they are swearing to provide for the immediate preservation of the public peace, health, safety, and general welfare of the municipality. That's a pretty serious responsibility, yeah? So let's talk about the city's master plan. The master plan is a document and policy guide designed to help communities create a vision of what they want to look like in the future. The master plan helps guide communities in their decisions on land use, development, and preservation. According to MCL section 125.3833, each city is required to develop, maintain, and update their master plan every 5 years or sooner, and any significant changes that could affect the public must be taken back to its citizens for review and input before adopting those changes. The master plan is a creation of the residents, by the residents of this city, after careful engagement and thoughtful planning. It reflects the intent of the public at the time each plan was adopted. The Planning Commission's job, sorry, that's kind of small. The Planning Commission's job is to implement these guidelines when making decisions on zoning and development going forward. Nowhere does it have a provision that allows the Planning Department to add additional changes that will accommodate their own vision, nor does it allow the Planning Commission to approve significant changes without taking them back to the citizens who originally developed the plan. Each commissioner should be fairly familiar with the master plan in its entirety, and it's a lot, I know, but boy, the master plan is awesome. Everybody that has participated in it has done a great job. But they need to be familiar with the master plan in order to make educated and informed decisions. According to the zoning ordinance, we see that the only metric that can be used to determine compatibility as required when addressing the criteria needed to grant a special use permit is the master plan. Page 178 of the zoning ordinance explains that the master plan is what must be used to ensure compatibility. There is no other metric. This avoids the risk of any board member's bias from entering into the decision-making. The elimination of individual interpretation should make the board's job fairly straightforward. But before we get into the specific criteria at issue here, there's a critical clarification that needs to be addressed. The master plan, as it has been referred to all along in relation to this project, is not actually referring to the corner. that's the subject of this battle. They're not talking about the southeast corner. The descriptions and drawings pertaining to Pickard Avenue development is actually described as the area immediately to the north and east of the intersection of West Pickard Avenue and Main Street. That is the location wanting a new focused direction, a focused vision. And already being a designated CD4 zone, that area is very well suited to the use of commercial and small-scale industrial development that would accommodate and support entrepreneurs living and working in a creative environment. This is taken off that page. Suggestions include a dance studio, metalwork, and high-tech industries. And yes, a gas station could fit the plan, although the master plan acknowledges that measures to secure outdoor hazardous activities would be necessary to achieve this vision. And building code regulations might prove to be prohibited in this capacity. This wording is straight out of the page in the master plan. So there it is. The master plan is actually addressing the property kitty corner from the now Christone property on the north side of Pickard, across the road. And even then, there's the acknowledgement that hazardous activities could be prohibited. When citizens were developing their vision for this area, they were looking to the north corner. Nothing in the master plan addresses south and east corners that connects to Palmer Street, which just so happens to be a main gateway to the Old North neighborhood, zoned CD3 residential until June of 2025. Palmer Street was never supposed to be part of the plan. Man, what was everybody thinking? By granting Chris the change in zoning to CD4, and part of it was, it allows them to spread onto Palmer Street for the storefront as a food mart. In fact, Chris has gotten permission to change the address of the historic brick building on the corner, the old Trains hardware store, from 802 Main Street to 111 Palmer Street, right next to 113 Palmer Street. Keep in mind the hardware storefront was always on Main Street, and we'll get to the problems that causes in just a little bit. Just know that in their haste to fill in other blighted property, most of the members of the Planning Commission blindly went along with Mrs. Pavadeko's assurances that the Chris proposal met each of the 7 criteria for granting a special use permit. How many carefully studied site plans independently, and maybe even took a tour of that area to really consider the ramifications of building a gas station nearly on top of Carol's home? How many paused long enough to even consider the obvious risks to a residential neighborhood, or to the Chippewa River, which is only 164 yards downhill from this property? How many even bothered to study how or if this proposal actually met the stated goals of the master plan? I'm going to guess that not all of them, but Manuela said the plan met the criteria, so the Planning Commission, with 2 exceptions, followed her lead, and they voted to approve the SUP and the SRP. Now let's talk about special use permits. A special use permit allows a landowner to use a property in a manner that is not typically allowed under existing zoning laws. Its primary purpose is to provide flexibility within zoning classifications while still protecting public interests. They require close scrutiny due to impacts like noise, traffic, or aesthetics. They must enhance rather than distract from the neighborhood vitality. The proposed use must not adversely affect public health, safety, or general welfare. Special use permits must protect the quality of life for the surrounding area. As such, there are a number of factors that must be considered before granting a special use permit. These factors are guided by the state statutes and case law, including the Michigan Zoning and Enabling Act, MCL 125.3502, and the American Planning Association zoning practice. It requires that there's consistency with the comprehensive plan. It must align with the community's master plan. It must have compatibility with the surrounding uses. It has to be compatible with the existing neighborhood character. It has to protect the public health, safety, and welfare. It has to consider risks such as traffic, fire, noise, or pollution. and that has to consider environmental impacts. Must evaluate wetlands, floodplains, groundwater, etc. In applying for a special use permit, Christ has to prove that they are compliant with all special use criteria, all 7. And this has to be supported by competent, material, and substantial evidence. Oops, I'm getting behind here. In other words, Christ can't just say they met the 7 criteria. They have to prove it based on factual findings, and it has to be tied to community planning goals. So let's take a look at these criteria. Number 1, the special use shall be one listed as a SUP for the district or civic zone in which the property is located, and the use shall be consistent with the intent and purpose of this chapter and the objectives of the currently adopted master plan. Christ responded that the subject property is in the CD4 General Urban Zoning District. The use is described as a convenience store and food mart with additional use of an automobile filling station. First of all, let's call it what it is. Christ intends to build a second gas station with an attached convenience store. If you look up the definition of what a food mart is, Christ is not a food mart. They are a convenience store. There's a difference. The zoning map shows that a narrow portion of the area where Christ intends to build a service drive for delivery trucks may actually, a sliver of it, may actually be zoned CD3. And those trucks would be exiting onto Palmer Street, and a portion of that, when they're driving across it, is in a CD3 zoned area. Palmer Street, although a secondary trunk, it's a very narrow residential street. And if residents wish to park on either side of this street, as is encouraged by the city master plan, trucks are going to be hard pressed to safely access that portion of Palmer Street to get to Main without the risk of somebody's vehicle being scraped. And that's assuming a right turn only directive will consistently be followed by every driver every time. When traffic starts piling up, and it will at certain times during the day, as we discovered today, the temptation to turn left into Palmer and access Pickard using one of the side streets like University, Franklin, Lansing, maybe even Fancher, that's going to result in big truck traffic using residential zoned streets. This is in direct conflict to the city's master plan's intent to have traffic calming measures in residential areas. And there are other issues that will be caused by placing this egress drive as planned on the site map. But we need to circle back to that in just a couple of minutes. For now, it's very important to have the zoning boundary lines in this area clearly and accurately determined. In June of this year, former planning board member John Zhang made a formal request for an advisory decision to be made as is allowed in the city's zoning ordinance section 154.609. That could require a professional survey in order to issue precise boundaries in an area that has some pretty unclear jogs and turns. I'm still not sure. And I don't know if he ever got a formal determination, but if so, what was that based on? Opinion or a formal survey? Because those boundaries are not clear. Regardless, even in a CD4 zone, Christ would still have required an SUP in order to build a gas station. But let's take a look at the city master plan that was adopted in 2014. In figure 30, labeled as future land use, you can see that Pickard and Main, you can't really see it up there, Pickard and Main was designated as office use on the southeast corner. The northeast corner was for commercial, which it currently is, and Palmer Street's still residential. And that takes us back to our earlier statement that the master plan at no time involved Palmer Street for anything other than residential. And the vision for this area was confined to the frontages of West Pickard Avenue and North Main. And even then, there was emphasis on enforcement of residential and commercial building codes and safety regulations, and the acknowledgement that outdoor hazardous activities might prove to be prohibitive in this capacity. And that was specifically referring to the property across the street, kitty corner from the property we're discussing here tonight. Now I ask you, What could possibly be more hazardous than a gas station being built in a residential neighborhood? So no, the CRIST plan is not consistent with the intent and objectives of the city master plan, not on this corner, but across the street, and not in our neighborhood. Criteria 2, the special use permit shall be operated in a manner compatible with surrounding land uses within 300 measured feet of the lot line. Compatibility includes, but is not limited to, hours of operation and environmental effects like noise, light, traffic, intensity of use, and density. And criteria 3, which goes along with that, applicant will demonstrate how the use is compatible with surrounding land use. CRIST claims to be compatible with the surrounding land uses, which they describe as including a mixture of commercial uses, such as a liquor store, along with residential uses. Come on, this is for sure a residential neighborhood that has a small liquor store with a small footprint on the outside of our perimeter. The other businesses that are just outside our perimeter include a dental office, the post office, restoration house, a yoga studio, etc. Nothing that poses a hazard to our neighborhood is involved. Nothing that causes increased traffic. We believe CRIST's claim is intentionally deceptive about what this neighborhood is. CRIST claims that they will service the needs of the nearby residential area and will maintain similar hours to the nearby liquor store. And furthermore, their plan to limit light and environmental effects from escaping the lot will be managed by using a fence. A fence. CRIST claims they will integrate seamlessly into the nearby land uses that will complement the existing uses of the CD4 district, which runs along Pickard and North Main, adjacent to the lot. They also claim to serve the needs of the residents in the nearby residential areas by providing the residents of these with lots of products that they need, such as food, drink, and gasoline. These aren't lots. These are homes surrounded by our yards. They're not broken up into lots per se. It's a detail. But first, where to begin? CRIST will not be providing any of us with anything we need. For instance, if you have 3 pairs of shoes, you don't really need another pair of shoes. It's not like we live out in the middle of nowhere and there isn't a source for food, drink, or petrol anywhere nearby. We have multiple gas stations in town. We have 3 within easy walking distance that provide all of those things. Citco, a local business, Speedway, and Meijer, none of which pose a direct risk to our health, safety, or well-being. And there is no argument about the fact that convenience store foods are not essential to our health. Quite the opposite. Studies show that people in inner city neighborhoods who actually do rely on convenience store foods for their sole source of nutrition have a rate of obesity, diabetes, and kidney disease far greater than those who have access to a variety of nutritious and fresh foods. We do not need beer. We do not need soda pop. We do not need chips or candy or roller hot dogs or microwave Hot Pockets or pastries or cookies or brats or bacon. Bacon. Sorry. And their eggs and milk are certainly not at a price point that compares with Meijer. So let's just be honest here. CRIST does not provide a single thing we can't get within 3 to 5 blocks of this property. It's redundant. We do not need another gas station, especially one that is built in our residential neighborhood. And how about that seamless integration? CRIST says they will follow similar operating hours as the nearby liquor store. Well, the Empty Keg doesn't open until 11 o'clock in the morning, and CRIST has promised to close at 10 p.m. The other nearest commercial property is the post office, and it's open from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. and closed on the weekends, half those hours on Saturday. CRIST has stated that they plan to be open from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m., for now at least. So are they going to forego servicing the bar traffic? You know, stop in it after the bar closes, grab some more beer, some smokes, maybe gas on the way home. Traffic around here in our neighborhood gets pretty darn quiet after 8 p.m., or at least that's the way it is now. It gets even quieter in the winter. Actually, the sidewalks pretty much roll up after 6 p.m. in the winter. So Chris really doesn't plan on maintaining similar hours. Not really. The only possible thing that Chris could bring to the table that isn't already available is the tax benefits. But according to the Zoning Board of Appeals, Section 154.608, the possibility of increasing financial return shall not be of itself to be deemed sufficient to warrant a variance. Rather than adding value to this residential area, Chris will actually distract from established local businesses in very close proximity who already meet our needs for food, drink, and gasoline. In the 2020 Master Plan, Book 1, page 5, attached residential zone CD4, it states, development on vacant lots within this residential classification should be encouraged with character and scale to be compatible with older existing structures and development of these residential neighborhoods. Buildings are to have a residential scale and character and should present a traditionally proportioned building facade to the street. And additionally, on-street parking is encouraged. Under sustainable land use, page 17, 1.3, the master plan requires structures to harmonize with the architectural precedents of highly valued historical structures and landmarks, and improve landscape aesthetics and entryways into the neighborhoods. The plan also requires new buildings to be of similar existing quality to existing structures. Additionally, Objective 1.8 says to enable adaptive reuse of structures and to require new buildings to be of similar quality. Chris has no plan to reuse part of this beautiful old brick building. Just tear it all down. Let's take a look at the homes of the Old North End. Now here's a Grist gas station. Old North End, Grist gas station. The Old North End neighborhood is the oldest original neighborhood in Mount Pleasant. It was developed prior to 1860, and homes from North Venture Avenue were built in the late 1880s, with many still retaining their original architectural design. Many homes on Palmer Street were built in between 1900 and 1909. While the 2020 City's Master Plan 2050 has a greater focus on Mission Street and West Pickard Streets, the Old North End has remained essentially the same, tucked away primarily south of Pickard Avenue and east of Main Street, and it's been that way for many years. We spent a little time looking at how other communities address issues like ours. I mean, every city has to have a master plan, right? Strangely enough, we discovered another community group who also goes by the Old North End. We originally thought that it was an old group of our neighbors who had joined together to develop a plan for our neighborhood many years ago. And it was pointed out to us recently that that's in Colorado. That's not Mount Pleasant. But their goals are in perfect alignment with what our North End neighbor group has been shooting for over the past few years. And our master plan also strongly encourages neighbors to form collaborative groups that address the direction we wish to see in our own neighborhood. Their plan mirrors our own goals perfectly and follows many of the provisions included in our own master plan. Those goals include reducing the impacts of traffic, especially from trucks, reducing levels compatible with historic urban character, and restore quiet residential neighborhood streets, and also discourage the incursion of non-compatible uses. It's perfectly said. That's what we are looking for. It makes sense, but we sincerely apologize for any confusion we caused by referencing a plan that is in fact not our own. So there's an attachment to the original appeal that does not apply, just so you know. I think it's attachment C. Just ignore it. The Old North End has achieved the desired balance of a diverse mix of young families with children, older adults, and single urban professionals who can afford the starter homes like those recently acquired, or those who are downsizing into post-retirement living. These homes south of Pickard and east of Main Street have had a buffer of sorts that has allowed us to enjoy our quiet little neighborhood. And this will all change if Chris is allowed to build as planned. The Planning Commission failed to consider how a gas station on this corner is completely incompatible with the oldest established neighborhood in the city. Or does it just not matter? I mean, so what if it doesn't follow the master plan? Criteria number 4 states the special use shall not interfere with the general enjoyment of the surrounding area, defined as adjacent and or abutting properties, including properties separated by streets, alleys, or other right-of-ways. Chris answers this by saying, the use shall maintain the enjoyment of the surrounding areas by maintaining access to all surrounding areas. I'm not sure what that means. That's not really an answer. Their plan is to build a fence line that will separate the nearby residential lot adjacent to the southeast section of the property. And they say the nearby driveways to the residential home and liquor store shall be maintained as they are now. Well, it's nice to know they're going to leave Carol's driveway alone, since it is her driveway. And the last time I looked, the empty keg has its own entrance, separate from the corner lot. So Chris has no need to concern themselves with that driveway either. There's nothing to maintain. But let's go back to that fence thing. The blueprints show a plan to build a 6-foot fence along the far east side of the property, running all the way out to the edge of the sidewalk. This is supposedly to prevent noise, lights, and vapor from encroaching on the neighbors. Now, I see some eye rolls out there. That was kind of our reaction too. There are multiple problems with this. First is the issue with line of sight for that driveway. A fence running all the way to the sidewalk would restrict the minimum line of sight requirements necessary to see oncoming traffic from east on Palmer Street. The Federal Highway Administration recognizes that every driveway that opens onto a roadway must be carefully managed so as to protect the safety of motor vehicles, bicyclists, and pedestrians. And we have a lot of bicyclists and pedestrians. It's a very heavily walked neighborhood. In Michigan, when entering a residential street from a driveway, visibility must be maintained so that nothing obstructs the view above 3.5 feet in height for a distance of 12 feet from the curb. This includes fences and walls and shrubs and trees and all that other stuff. It ensures that drivers can see the oncoming traffic clearly to avoid accidents. Additionally, a buffer area is required adjacent to the driveway to ensure that unobstructed visibility and safety is maintained for both drivers and for pedestrians. The minimum amount of time needed to avoid a collision with oncoming traffic is approximately 7.5 to 10 seconds. That's assuming traffic is following the speed limit of 25 miles per hour. And let me tell you, the traffic on Palmer Street rarely adheres to only 25 miles per hour. Ask anybody that lives on it. Traffic blasts through from Fancher all the way to Main in about 10 seconds at 40 miles per hour. It's crazy. A truck pulling out from the driveway could easily miss seeing one of those speed racers coming from Fancher. Who's going to clean up that mess? So Chris' plan to erect a 6-foot fence all the way to the sidewalk clearly will not meet the MDOT guidelines. It's simply not allowed. And let's be real here. Neither a 3.5-foot fence nor a 6-foot fence is going to contain noise, light, or vapor pollution from the rest of the immediate neighborhood. But we'll get back to that in just a few minutes. Let's keep going with the problems caused by placing a driveway along the far east side of the property, where Chris plans to limit use strictly to company tankers and refrigerator trucks and to have them exit onto Palmer Street. They apparently believe that signage stating that it's an exit only for company vehicles and for right turns only to direct traffic flowing back into Main Street, that it will be all it takes to ensure that there's not going to be increased traffic into our neighborhood. Sure, just put up a sign. They seem confident that nobody will try using this driveway to access the gas station from Palmer Street in order to avoid traffic congestion on Pickard or any other through streets. In order to avoid traffic congestion on Pickard or Main. Or how about the customers who slip out the back way to access Fancher or any other through streets leading to downtown? We can absolutely guarantee that this will happen on the regular and it will result in increased traffic volume in our neighborhood. We know the best way to prevent traffic from causing property value loss is to keep traffic volume low and avoid use of neighborhood streets by heavy trucks. This is a dilemma that is in direct conflict with our master plan's goal of calming traffic in residential neighborhoods. And now, Chris has redirected the convenience storefront to open onto Palmer Street. The original hardware storefront was always on Main Street. Where do you think people are going to park to run in and grab smokes and snacks and beer? Oh, Palmer Street, of course. That brings more traffic into our neighborhood and interferes with the master plan's goal of using on-street parking for residents of the neighborhood. Residents, not convenience store patrons. Chris claims traffic on Palmer will be limited as no incoming traffic to the store shall be allowed off Palmer. Seriously? What authority does Chris believe they have to say who can use Palmer Street and for what purpose? Palmer is a public street. Where exactly are people supposed to park if they want to use the convenience store? If patrons are expected to enter the convenience store from the rear, why is the storefront oriented on Palmer? Why was the address changed? No, we believe that Chris has every intention of having people enter the convenience store from the Palmer entrance. And that means incoming traffic will most certainly be using Palmer Street for parking and to enter the store. And speaking of the congestion that will be caused by allowing Chris to put a gas station on this corner, we were told that a traffic count was done, and that's nice. Now we know how many cars traveled on Pickard and on Main on a given day. Was that when CMU was in session? Was it summertime, winter, around a holiday? Doing a traffic count in no way assesses the actual patterns of traffic that will occur when traffic is backed up during peak daytime hours. And believe me, it gets backed up. Drivers are not going to be willing to wait through 2 or more changes of the traffic signal when they can just cut through the residential connector routes to get to where they need to go. Mission Street, downtown, campus. Face it, Fancher Avenue is a prime thoroughfare to quickly get from one side of town to the other. And this doesn't even take into account the gridlock that occurs when a train goes through. Traffic from trains can be stopped dead for 10 to 15 minutes. Westbound traffic sometimes is backed up to Lansing Street and even Fancher. It's not unusual to see vehicles stuck on Pickard who were trying to head west, suddenly hanging a U-ey in the middle of the road and coming back to University or Franklin or Lansing. Throw in a tanker or a refrigerator truck and any extra traffic trying to get gas or stop into the convenience store, and you have yourself a hot, stinking mess. Especially in the summer when it's 90 degrees and everyone is idling with the AC running full blast. Did you know that more than 1.5 million residents this summer were advised to avoid refilling vehicles and limit driving in early June? An air quality advisory was issued warning of the risks of increased air pollution that were particularly dangerous for vulnerable groups, including the elderly, children, and those with respiratory conditions. We have a bunch of all of those in our neighborhood. And that was when it was only in the 70s and 80s, but with high humidity and lots of wind. The volatile organic compounds that are released when gas is being pumped in these conditions, and the emissions released when a vehicle sits idling, are dispersed along on the wind currents, which just happens to bathe everyone who lives in the critical few blocks along the Old North neighborhood on Palmer, and probably a little farther away. Building a gas station on this corner compounds this problem exponentially, and there's no good justification for putting the residents of this neighborhood at continual risk. Lastly, the plan to use Palmer Street as an exit for heavy trucks does not take into consideration that this is a fairly narrow residential street. Along with the on-street parking that causes insufficient room to pass, there's the added problem of increased stress placed on the pavement, which over time accelerates the deterioration on a roadway that was not originally designed to handle such heavy traffic. Now, I understand you said that they've changed a bit. I know they redid Palmer. We didn't know why, but that will still impact the constant trucks on there will still impact the over time. And this portion of Palmer Street was just recently redone. Had a traffic impact study been done, maybe it would have been more clear as to the problems that would be caused by granting the special use permit. Again, placing a gas station and convenience store within a residential neighborhood was never part of the city's master plan. All these traffic problems will certainly adversely affect us directly and not in a good way, as Carol lives nearly on top of this property and nearby neighbors will also be affected. Now let's go back to the fence. Yeah, the fence, the 6-foot fence that would supposedly shield Carol and her family and the neighbors from sound and light and volatile microparticles that are released in the process of dispensing gas. I think we've established that at least a portion of this fence cannot be 6 feet high. And seriously, a fence might keep out cattle or maybe even keep people from wandering into Carol's yard, but do you seriously believe a fence will keep prying eyes of the curious from observing whatever she and her family are doing on a daily basis, or keep trash from blowing into her yard? And with all the lovely landscaping plans they've made for Pickard and Maine, not a single tree or bush or shrub was planned to be planted along the east property line, which could have possibly helped, maybe deaden the sound a little bit, maybe added another layer of privacy, I don't know. And how is the fence going to stop light pollution? On June 6th, the CRISP representative said the light pollution would be controlled by LED lights over the bay being directed downward. We're all familiar with the glow that emanates from those lights, even when dialed down. Then there's the lights along the front of the convenience store. Are those going to be turned off completely? I mean, I highly doubt it, because to do so would invite break-ins. And while Carol doesn't want constant light infringing on the peacefulness of her night, neither does she want criminal activity invited near her. Understandable. Don't forget that that part of the 6-foot fence, which is supposed to reduce bothersome light, will be no more than 3.5 feet high, leaving some of the house along the west side constantly bathed in the glow of LED light all night long. Currently, there's a soothing darkness out in the backyard, perfect for stargazing, that will absolutely be disrupted by the lighting Chris will have installed. And then I had the cojones to claim that the noise would not be a problem because they don't have outdoor speakers over their bays. Let's talk about noise. There are hundreds of decibels produced when a wall of bricks hits the ground. A backhoe, 80 decibels. A jackhammer, 88 decibels. A generator, 81 decibels. Concrete mixture, 85 decibels. A pile driver, 101 decibels. They all produce enormous amounts of sound. An idling diesel emits noise at 85 to 110 decibels for a distance of 50 feet. Trucks and tankers are kept idling while parked during deliveries to keep their systems running. A car engine produces 80 to 90 decibels, as does the thumpa, thumpa, thumpa of the jacked up car stereo radiating from young speed racers' whip. The risk of hearing loss starts at around 70 decibels. Exposure to sounds at or above 85 decibels damages your hearing. Sound travels at 343 meters per second. It takes 1.46 seconds for sound to travel 500 meters. That's about 5 city blocks. We can easily hear the races at the Speedway and the sound of softball games at Island Park. At least those are intermittent. There will absolutely be adverse impacts on Carol and the neighbors. But there's the fence, you know, the 6-foot fence. Chris claims that's sufficient to contain the noise and the light. The Planning Commission didn't even blink. I don't know if it's indifference or what, but I think we can all agree that that's pretty outrageous. It's just a bald-faced lie. Between demolition and rebuilding, we will be denied the peaceful enjoyment we have had while living in this neighborhood. To suggest that the noise, traffic, vapors, lights, and general disruption is of no concern to those who live beyond 300 feet of this property is simply absurd. Criteria 5 instructs Chris to show how the special use will not have an adverse impact on the surrounding neighborhood within 300 feet of its lot line with regards to traffic, noise, architectural compatibility, hours of operation, light, odors, and the like. That 300 feet thing is pretty random, I think. Chris responds that the special use will not have any adverse impacts on the surrounding lots. It will not restrict movement to the liquor store or the post office, and no incoming traffic to the store will be allowed on Palmer. I'd like you to think about that for just a minute. The liquor store, the post office, what do those have to do with the residents that live inside the perimeter of the old North End? What about the architectural compatibility, the noise, the cross-through traffic? What about the residents? When the city police and fire department relocated to its current space on High Street, there was concern among the neighbors about the sound they would have to deal with. Understandable. To shield those neighbors, a proper fence was built. Well, actually, it was a wall, a big brick wall over 6 feet high that completely walled off the business from the neighborhood in this walled off the neighbors in this upscale neighborhood. I don't know, I guess Carroll residents of the Old North End don't rate the same consideration. As a member of the Saginaw Chippewa tribe, Carol has shared with us that she's sort of used to being treated as a second-rate citizen. That's right. Carol is a proud member of the Saginaw Chippewa tribe, and there are other tribal families, other homeowners living close to her in this neighborhood who also have children and who also would like to be protected from the sound, light, and air pollution. In fact, there's a daycare and school just 5 blocks east of this property. More than a few Native babies and kids go there. I've always been eager to champion my Native babies. Yeah. So how are they going to be protected from the toxic drift? All the kids, actually. According to the National Institute of Health, populations living in the vicinity of a service station are expected to have higher exposure to volatile gasoline-related hydrocarbons. That would mean that those exposed would have higher risks for all the things we've already listed: leukemia, brain cancer, COPD, liver and kidney disease, endocrine disorders, asthma, and the list goes on. Aren't these children and elders worthy of protection from these avoidable risks? During the June 5th meeting, Chris said they would be responsible for the cleanup. And at that time, they had only taken several soil samples, but none from the building. We have no doubt that there is asbestos in the building just because of when it was built. As we learned during the asbestos remediation from the Gowning building, it can take a very long time, and it requires professional asbestos remediation teams. Chris indicated they plan to begin demolition as soon as January 2026. Asbestos remediation done properly is critical. We learned that it involves using a special water spray to help control the dust when the building is demolished. With freezing temps, there'd have to be some careful monitoring to be sure that no corners got cut. But whether done properly or not, we can all agree this is not a minimal risk. And what fun contaminants will be unearthed from the soil? In looking over the environmental assessments that had been done prior on this property, we know for sure there is chromium, lead, trichloroethene, tetrachloroethene, et cetera, et cetera. Property all along West Pickard has been undergoing extensive brownfield reservations. It's taken years to carefully remove contaminated soil layer by layer and haul it away. It's not a simple or quick fix, and there's no magic way to properly speed the process up, unless Chris knows something we don't. But there's no question about it, this property is a toxic waste dump. Who knows what all will be released once Pandora's box is opened up wide? Chris cannot say with any certainty that demolition will carry minimal risk. Carol and her children will get the biggest dose, followed by the neighbors who all will suffer at varying degrees on down the block. Those with babies and young children and the elders of the neighborhood will be at greater risk, even with small amounts of toxic drift. This is part of the reason this property has sat vacant for so long. Other prospective businesses have inquired about buying it, but the prior owners, who did not take advantage of the brownfield remediation funds, and I'm told, had included the burden of cleaning it up as part of the sale. And so this property has been on and off the market for over a period of about 30 years. It was not listed on the market on June 5th. It did not show as being for sale until June 11th, at which time Chris Doyle bought it for an extremely low price, extremely below market value. Had we as neighbors known how ridiculously affordable it was going to be at that time, who knows what we could have put together as a group for an offer that would have allowed us to perhaps develop this lot into something truly representative of the city of Mount Pleasant and the gateway to downtown, something that would honor the history of the Trains family and maybe even the tribe. While not formally part of Tribal District 1, the city still lies within the boundaries of the Isabella Reservation and has long held a cooperative relationship when it comes to financial support. Chris' site plan calls for an in-ground gasoline storage tank to be buried just a few feet from Carol's property. They claim that the double-walled tank meets the guidelines and safeguards required to reduce the chance of leaking. Reduce the chance. Well, that's great, but what happens when human error causes the tank to be overfilled, spilling hundreds of gallons of gas into her yard and the surrounding soil and into the groundwater, all the way up to the Chippewa River? Kind of like what happened in Marquette in March of 2018, when 180 gallons of gasoline overflowed while filling the storage tank from the supply tanker. That spill required evacuation of the neighborhood and major cleanup of the local river, which was located over a mile away from the Chris property. Remember, the closest point of the Chippewa River is just 164 yards from this property, downhill, with multiple storm sewers emptying into the river, and even the occasional spills of gasoline during refueling or when filling up those red plastic containers for lawnmowers and yard care equipment. It still soaks into the concrete and it's washed away during heavy rainstorms, kind of like we had on Sunday, where it's carried to the subsurface soil and even the storm sewers, where it eventually makes it out to the Chippewa River. That's where the kids go tubing. That's where families kayak and canoe. That's where they fish, and gasoline can take weeks to evaporate in those conditions. Does anyone remember a few years back when we had that flood that covered the roof of the Island Park Pavilion? That was crazy. Streets all around the city were flooded out, and for a while, that vacant lot was underwater. And when the waters receded, all the poisons that were trapped in the soil had an opportunity to leach into the groundwater and out to the chip. Well, not all of the contaminants, but contaminants that were there. Anyone remember the shiny rainbow-colored film that floated on top of the surface for a while? I do. I wouldn't let my kids go swimming. Intentionally allowing a gas station to be built on this property is just inviting unnecessary risks to add to an already contaminated area. Why would you do that? Even in answering criteria 7, when addressing the question of whether the special use can be adequately served of the existing facilities, there's the Chippewa River. When addressing the question of whether special uses can be adequately served by the existing public facilities and services, Christ states that an underground stormwater detention system shall be placed on the property to reduce flows into the city's nearby storm sewer. Would Christ care to quantify that statement? Reduce flows by how much? 80%? 50%? 20%? Why did no one on the Planning Commission question that statement? Because that's an important issue that bears further clarification. To claim that this special use permit will not have any impact on the surrounding properties, and especially on Carol and her family, it's just disappointing, especially since the zoning regulations specifically require that a special use permit must not adversely affect the public health, safety, and general welfare of the community. How do you define adverse effect? When did it become okay to put profits ahead of people and simply turn a blind eye to the health risks, increased traffic congestion, the disruption to a balanced and well-established neighborhood, the noise and more light pollution, not to mention the architectural compatibilities of a hideous red, white, and blue gas station in our historical neighborhood? It's laughable. Talk about ruining the character of the old North End. Chris brings with him a whole laundry list of issues that do not make them compatible with our neighborhood. I encourage you to do your own investigation into the problems that have been reported with gasoline spills, fire at one of the UP properties, and I'm just going to stop there. When we talk about approving a business that has a history of past hazardous incidents, it justifies our resistance and strong opposition to having a gas station brought into our neighborhood. And while we can appreciate the pressures to perform and promote more development in the city, there's no justification for that kind of disregard. Development at the expense of the safety and well-being of an entire well-established neighborhood is in direct conflict with the requirements of granting a special use permit. Gasoline, petroleum products, we still need them, but we have to be smart about where they are stored and dispensed. According to the National Institute of Health, populations living in the vicinity of a service station are expected to have higher exposure to volatile gasoline-related hydrocarbons, Volatile fractions of gas are released into the atmosphere during every phase of gasoline transport, from filling the storage tanks to refilling cars to topping off those 3-gallon containers. And the variables that influence measured concentrations of gasoline vapors, hydrocarbons, include wind direction, velocity, and ambient temperatures, which increase with heat and humidity. For those who fill their tanks and leave, or store employees who are somewhat protected from constant exposure from the vapors while inside the building, they're at low risk. But those who live nearby will be exposed to these volatile fractions of gas all day, every day, week after week, month after month. With the predominant wind direction for the Old North End coming out of the west and northwest, those living closest to the property will be constantly bathed in microfractions of these volatile toxins. Mount Pleasant has had some fairly stiff winds in these past few months. Some have averaged over 25 miles an hour. Those of us living closest to this gas station will get the highest doses. Chronic and subchronic exposure to the volatile compounds, benzene, toluene, ethylbenzene, xylene, that make up the toxic components of gasoline can have negative effects on the heart, the lungs, the liver, the kidneys, the endocrine system, the nervous system. And it might take weeks or months or even a year or two, but you can't put toothpaste back into a tube once it's been squeezed out. And you can't undo the damage that is caused by chronic exposure to the toxic components of petroleum. We have submitted multiple research papers and abstracts that support these statements. We will be the first to be affected, kind of like the canary in the coal mines. Approval of this site plan is not compatible with the vision stated in the 2020 Master Plan 2025. It conflicts with the established designated zones. The point of having a master plan is that it is intended to be used for not only the well-coordinated and development of the city, but also to ensure health, safety, prosperity, and well-being of those who already live here. The master plan demands quality in our growth. Accepting suboptimal businesses to be part of that expansion and blurring the zoning lines simply to fill an empty space does a great disservice to those who have worked so hard to make Mount Pleasant a place where people want to live. It certainly destroys the sanctity of the special neighborhood we grew up in, bought homes in, choose to live in, felt safe in. By allowing a gas station to be built within our residential neighborhood, you take away our choice to be free of environmental hazards, our desire to be free of avoidable health risks, to raise our children without worrying whether or not our close proximity to a gas station will cause them to develop leukemia or brain cancer. We were here first. We have always been inside the perimeter, the south side of Pickard, the east side of Maine, and the businesses located outside this perimeter have never posed any danger to us. But by approving this special use permit, you've now gone and invited a clearly hazardous business into our perimeter, something that was never intended according to the master plan, right next door to Carol and the neighbors. We believe that the zoning board wants to do the right thing for our community. We believe that they will follow the statutes and regulations as provided when determining whether or not all 7 criteria were met, and whether Chris provided solid proof to back up their statements and their answers to those 7 criteria. We believe it's possible to support growth without jeopardizing neighborhood safety, and we firmly believe that the cumulative effects of developing this property as a gas station will cause an unusually harmful land use that will result in an unresolvable impact on area residents. We do not believe Crest Oil has met all the conditions of the 7 criteria required. They have made claims that they have not supported with solid evidence as required. Their site plans do not meet certain guidelines, such as those required by the Michigan Department of Transportation. For all these reasons, supported by the studies and research we have submitted, my neighbors and I strongly believe this approval of special use permit 2509 and site SPR 25, site plan review 25.5 was granted in error. We respectfully ask that after careful consideration and close review, you reverse this decision and rescind the approval. Thank you so much for your time and attention. I'm coming.
Give me a question.
Does any of the board have any questions at this time for the applicant? Being none. At this time, I would like to ask if the owner or owner's representative, if they would like to come forward and provide any response to the appeal or information related to the approval from the planning commission.
Yeah.
We'd like to reserve the, after all hearing statements remains.
If we,
I don't believe that's procedurally. If you have an opportunity, you have to do it now.
We would still have the right to speak at the end of the public hearing as a member of the public then, correct?
5 minutes.
Well, I would ask that considering the fact that they are represented by a group, I represent the organization, we would be afforded additional time. That's not uncommon.
I'm sorry, that does not follow our procedures at all.
Okay. Well,
At least that's my feeling. The other members of the board may feel differently.
I agree.
I think he's right.
well, it's ultimately up to you guys, so, there's a lot to digest there. This may take quite a bit of time to respond. I took as much notes as I could. I guess I'll start out with a few administrative issues. For starters, well, actually, let me grab my briefcase. I've got a couple things I'm gonna need to address. I'll do my best to lean in. It's not,
Excuse me, sir. We're having a little discussion here and I was thinking about, you're probably going to go more than 5 minutes. Is that correct?
oh yeah,
Okay. Then I think we're going to take a little recess,
okay,
just like a 5-minute break,
Yeah, that works.
10-minute break.
sure,
And then we'll come back.
very good.
Okay.
Well, I think that's a fair one, too. We'll give you just a second to find your seats and then we'll resume the meeting. We'll come back to order. The applicant.
Okay. I just want to, in full transparency here, this may take some time.
Oh, sir, could you introduce?
Yeah, my
yourself?
name is Mark McKellar, McKellar. I'm an attorney at Coon Rogers in Traverse City, Michigan. We've represented Chris at several land use development projects. My practice primarily focuses on land use approvals and the administrative processes associated with those. I just throw this out there. I don't mean to change the plans or anything, but this may take, over an hour and a half for me to respond. And then you have the public hearing. And if that's going to push this Board of Appeals to a point of no mas, I think, we'd be okay with tabling this issue and coming back and addressing this. And I understand she had a lot of information to provide. There's a large group there. I also want to do this in a way that isn't short-circuited. So it's up to you, but we're, as the respondent, I guess, we don't have an objection to that. And that may give everyone a more focused approach.
Keep going. Yeah, we'll keep going.
Okay, fair enough. I just wanted to put it out there. I don't want to have that go on. Okay, so I'm going to start with a couple procedural items. One of the members recused himself under the conflict of interest. Only putting this on the record for purposes of very legalese here is that he didn't state the purpose, so we object to it from that point of view, and wasn't contemplated. Other than that, I just want to put it on the record and move along. But
Can we ask which one you're objecting to?
that, Steve, the member that was on the planning commission before, that's a recognized basis.
Okay.
Yep, understood. Yep. Sorry for the non-clarity. But there's a fundamental standing issue regarding the applicant. And there's a case, Saugatuck Dunes, which recently came out in 3 years ago. And I'm going to quote it. And I think that's what we have here. The court explained that generalized concerns about traffic congestion, economic harms, aesthetic harms, environmental harms, and the like are not sufficient to establish that one has aggrieved party status by a zoning decision. The point is, they had the obligation to prove they had special damages. They haven't identified under the legal definition of what special damages are. That means something that's unique and different than anyone else in the public. Living in the neighborhood and experiencing these is not necessarily unique. Being adjacent is not a basis for standing. And so I think that the ZBA needs to be aware that there may be a standing issue. More importantly, like I said before, this is more of a matter of record keeping. That needs to be in the record, that we would object to the fact they probably don't even have standing. Second, the applicant is an individual, i.e. representing a group of individuals which are listed in their attachment. A separate individual came up saying that she represents this individual and, the neighbors, and is speaking for them and her. And I recognize that I don't think she said she was an attorney, and that's perfectly fine. In Michigan, when you make statements of the law and the applicable law and the facts and the standards, if you're not a licensed attorney, you can only make those statements in your individual role only. You cannot make that in a role of representation. I think she probably crossed the line in the unauthorized practice of law tonight, and that needs to be on the record. Now, again, a bookkeeping item, I don't know that it's really for the ZBA to consider, but I need to put that on the record just in case there's an appeal. Okay? Let's get to what we're talking about tonight. And that was maybe a shotgun approach to the issues that they perceive are a problem with the application for Christ. And I understand their concerns. I understand that they are upset. I understand they may have not felt heard. But nothing in the application and nothing in that presentation did I come away with that was record information during the decision. If all of this information was provided during the decision, it'd be part of the record. The Planning Commission would have the opportunity to review that information, their concerns, the facts that they allege are facts, their statements, and none of that information that I can see was ever provided in the record. There is a full record that's available here. What's important is the Zoning Board of Appeals standard, which is stated in the appeal application and throughout the ordinance, is that the appeal will only reverse decision that is based on an unreasonable view of the evidence or an erroneous interpretation of zoning ordinance, and that it is based on the information available to the initial decision maker and does not consider new information that is provided for the first time in appeal. That's basically the definition of what's called a record appeal. That universe does not include the statements and any of those attachments that were here. I would argue that they wouldn't have made a difference anyway. But even if they would have made a difference, it's not for this zoning board of appeal to consider. Your ZBA professionals, your planning department, and I'm confident your legal department have addressed that issue and made it clear to the zoning board of appeals. It's a record appeal. Aside from the fact that it's a record appeal, and I could probably end my comments there for decisions, they've made so many statements that I have to address in order to preserve the record. So bear with me. I apologize, but I do need to go through a lot of these items and maybe some misstatements. First of all, they characterize the property in the area as residential. It's not. This property, there are residential parcels around it, is not residential property. It, since the 1900s, early 1900s, has been a heavy commercial and industrial use property. And it has several characteristics and attributes of that that are still reminiscent of that time that are standing today, i.e. the building, okay? A building that they are concerned with the applicant not utilizing in keeping in line with restoring the historical area, but later speak to its inherent dangerous materials, which would require remediation. You can't have it both ways. It's got to be one or the other. The property is in need of remediation, both the building and the physical soils. And no one's done it because it's expensive. That's why it hasn't been done. It's quite expensive, and you have to be specialized or have knowledge in it. Christ has knowledge in that. Several of their gas stations, like many others, are on sites that are brownfields or contaminated sites that exist. They're not in greenfield sites. So they have a unique ability, knowledge, skill set, and that does lower the cost of that procedure, that it makes it attractive. The entry to that is the fact that they know things. Their attorneys, engineers, and consultants know those things, and the cost of simply just getting the permits is less expensive. The procedures and time to achieve that are shorter and more well-known. In terms of the concerns with the environmental, what must be understood is that EGLE has exclusive preemptive jurisdiction. It is not for the Planning Commission to determine that if it's safe or not for environmental purposes when there's a remediative activity that has to be permitted, the applicant, in this case, Chris, at the Planning Commission, is absolutely 100% required to meet the criterion for the EGLE. Third-party administrative approvals like that, final road permits, final driveway permits, final building permits, final soil and erosion permits, those are all done after the Planning Commission approves a site plan. You approve a site plan conditioned upon third-party approvals that are final, meaning you might not even issue the land use permit until certain permits are in hand, and you may not issue a building permit till certain permits are in hand. You aren't going to issue a compliance permit till certain permits are in hand. The Planning Commission's purview was to review the use and the site plan, not to review items that are under the jurisdiction of EGLE or MDOT. They properly didn't. They acknowledged the fact that it's a contaminated site and that it would require permitting, and therefore that is an inherent condition of the approval, and that's how they address the issue of contamination or environmental concerns being compliant. Had they acknowledged it's got materials and contamination and didn't ask what the plan was or didn't require that those permits were to be had, it would be a different question. That's not what happened. MDOT. There's been a lot of talk about the roads, the property surrounded by trunk roads. I may have inartfully in my response, as Mr. Orlick pointed out, said trunk or truck roads. The distinction being between a primary and secondary. What I was really addressing was the distinction between truck roads and non-truck roads. And it's not a local road in that sense. It is meant for truck traffic completely around the property. The standard that was stated about the fence and the MDOT provisions, two things. One is she made a statement and quoted the Federal Highway Agency. That's not applicable, and they don't have jurisdiction over the MDOT roads. The MDOT standard she spoke to, the distance and site, would be applicable to Pickard, but the portion of the fence and the issues is on a different road. MDOT doesn't have authority there. Secondly, the fence. That's a standard requirement of the ordinance. We don't have a choice. We have to place the fence there. It has to be of 6 feet in height. It is inherent that you are going to have noise and light and things like that, what are nuisances in any development, particularly commercial or industrial. And that's why there's police power ordinances to enforce those provisions of nuisance, noise, light, and sound. The zoning ordinance is designed by definition to promote the health, safety, and welfare of the community, and the provisions in it are considered by default, de facto by the legislature and by case law that the people that drafted it had the intention to allow those uses, and that the things that are in place are to protect and promote the health, safety, and welfare. That's why there's downshield lighting requirements. That's why there is visual requirements for fencing, sound detonation from fencing. We can't prohibit activities and we can't completely eradicate impacts. That's impossible. So that's why these things are in place. Nothing about the project doesn't meet the site plan criterion, period. Second of all, they didn't provide any evidence during the application that was empirical whatsoever, zero, that it wasn't compliant. Saying I don't think it's compliant is different than saying I have the ordinance here, it requires 6 feet and they only have a 5-foot fence. I have a standard here that says this and they don't meet it. That's what we're talking about is required, okay? The planning department here, I think was a little bit, I was a little surprised it was kind of under attack. The implication that wasn't even, veiled here was that the planning department somehow may be involved in some cabal and backroom deal with Christ to approve the project. If the amount of time Chris was spending with the city was indicative of that, and that was the belief, I assure you it was not that. I can assure you it was, there were several renditions of this plan. The city pre-application process was very robust. In fact, you should be very proud of your planning department and your planning commission. They reviewed it in great detail. It was revised several times to meet greater compliance, to give concessions, and come to this community with a plan that could be approved. The next suggestion was that the planning commission members don't know what they're doing. They don't understand the law. I mean, literally, statements that they probably haven't read the standards. They didn't know what they were applying. That's quite a statement. Further, it's just simply not true. They also didn't bring it up at the meeting, so it's not part of the record. But the planning commission, in fact, there was a conversation. It wasn't a perfectly up and down vote. That's indicative of the fact that people were contemplating things about the project that they liked or disliked, or that they felt were applicable. The issue is, because they don't have record information, they'd like to suggest that the planning commissioners, you know what, they didn't know what they were doing, so you have to reverse it. That is not a basis in the law, this ordinance, or anywhere in Michigan for a ZBA to overturn the planning commission's decision. The planning commission's decision is on a record of evidence. If they can't provide a record of evidence that shows why the decision should have gone the other way, then you must uphold the decision. Period. That's the standard. The statements, they're not defamatory because they're protected here. If they were stated out in the sidewalk, they would have been, about Christ and their operations, are also not appropriate. There's a set of case law regarding this that essentially, because someone might have a development or an issue in some other realm, is not within the purview of a planning commission on a site plan approval. Second of all, everything that they stated was an allegation. Nothing was actually proof of any activity that was inappropriate, and they won't find it. They also make misstatements about the city of Big Rapids, that it was denied 3 times, and and they leave out the part that was approved and it's being built and operating. Okay. The characterizations are simply to fit a narrative because they don't like the project. I get that. I understand that they don't like the project. I can even empathize with them because they live there. But it is not the role, and the courts have made this clear, it is not the role of the ZBA or Planning Commission to pick favorites. It is the role to apply the standards to the facts and make a decision. The Planning Commission made a decision, and maybe even those planning commissioners might have not liked the project, but they did their job. The ZBA likewise needs to do the same thing. Their concerns, as I hear them tonight, are with the process that the city went through and the lack of opportunity to present and a lack of understanding of the rules, and their responsiveness to that has been that they gathered after the meeting and they decided to look into this and see what was wrong. And that's fine. But the opportunity to bring record evidence was before the meeting. And the problem is, like they said, you can't put the toothpaste back in the container. You can't unring the bell of the decision. They're stuck with the record. And that record was sufficient. And there's no other record for the ZBA to consider to say it should be overturned. And in my opinion, and I think the law will flush this out, but that may be for someone in a black robe to decide later, is that the ZBA must approve the decision of the Planning Commission. Because the standards of the law are that they must be on record appeal. The issue with notice, 15 days notice, publication, 300 feet. That's the standard. It may seem arbitrary, but that's what the statute provides. This is my first time experiencing any community that's actually gone beyond that. I've probably done 100, 150, somewhere in there, land use applications, reviews, public hearings. I've never had a community do anything more than the public notice, post it inside, and put it on the newspaper for 15 days within 300 feet. Never had one go beyond 300 feet. It only goes to the owner. It doesn't have to go to the occupant. The fact that you guys went beyond that, posted on the property, it sounds crazy, but it's incumbent on the public to go do their due diligence. That is the standard. It's the same with owning property next to a property like this. We have a caveat emptor state, buyer beware. Everyone that bought there bought next to a property that is a blighted commercial property that has the ability to be developed for commercial purposes. It's not like it was residential and zoned commercial after they bought it. They have constructive notice. The law in Michigan is very clear. You have constructive notice. What does that mean? It means that you as a member of the public can go get the information to be educated on it. It doesn't need to come knocking to your door. That is the same theme in the case law regarding notice. Regarding information, the packets, they have the obligation to go to the municipality and ask for those things. That's what a FOIA request is for. This community doesn't even require a FOIA request a lot of times for that information. They just freely give it. I know that seems unusual. I know it seems maybe even crude, but it is the law. It is the standard that it has to be applied tonight. Okay? The entrance along Palmer for the convenience store, there was a concern about why it's there. Because the zoning ordinance requires it. We had to have a pedestrian access on the backside of the store. The main is on the front, facing Pickard. We don't have a choice. We don't make the rules. We just have to follow them in order to get approved. The implications of the plan criterion, specific dimensional standards that were brought up tonight that may have impacted the neighborhood or the neighbors. Again, those standards or criterion needed to be addressed at the planning commission meeting. Would have sounded something like this. Why do we have an entrance in the back when they have one in the front? Is there anything we can do about that? I don't like it. You know, there's a standard in the ordinance says that's, you know, can be waived by the the planner. You should waive it. The reason is it just enjoins promotes access in the back. That would have been an appropriate objection, citing some standard, asking for information with concern. Those weren't made. Those were not made. The characterization that with the master plan has to be completely met. Your planning folks and your ZBA liaison nailed it in their report. What the case law requires, and case law is Michigan's published law, and I'm probably telling Noah about the arc here, but I keep on saying it. I just want to make sure everyone understands what that means. That's applicable indicates that the general goals and objectives of a master plan need to be met. Not every one of them. Just conceptually, can you meet some of those goals and objectives? The master plan portions that were cited were a little disjointed. One was a standard for residential addition in that district. That is a standard for ADUs. That's really what that is. That is a residential standard for an accessory dwelling unit. That standard is not applicable at all to this application. They were trying to cite a planning criterion from Colorado, not applicable. They were trying to, you know, suggest that maybe the planning commission should consider those criterion in Colorado. Maybe they should, but it needs to be adopted into the criterion requirements of the zoning ordinance to do that. Not the place and time to do it. Not here, not part of this appeal. The issue of the narrow street. The community that provides the public roads has the obligation to provide access and commerce along those roads. Period. They can't prohibit who uses that road. If Chris doesn't go in there, trucks are allowed to commute through that road. The fact that it's narrow is up to the driver to manage and up for the city to determine whether or not they want to allow street parking anymore, or to widen the street, or to change the protocols within their zoning ordinance. Again, something that can be done legislatively at the Planning Commission, not part of this record. I understand people's fear of individuals walking on the property, utilizing it, and looking into their homes, into their areas. The problem is there's no expectation of privacy in the law from a publicly available space. And so the only thing that Chris can do is provide a fence within the confines of the ordinance. So I appreciate the concern. I have young children, I have a family, and I don't want people looking in my windows either. But there's only so much we can do. And we're bound by the criterion in the zoning ordinance to get there. The overwhelming issue that is brought up is we don't need it. We don't want it. There's a case in Michigan that says if site plans and land use were a popularity contest, we would only need one member of the Planning Commission with an applausometer to determine whether or not a project should be approved. I get that they don't want another gas station. Maybe they think there isn't a need for another gas station. Again, the Planning Commission doesn't get to pick winners and losers. They have to apply the standards to the facts. The reality is it isn't up to the neighbors to determine what the need is. It is up to the municipality to determine if the applicant meets the criterion. This Planning Commission of this city determined that the criterion were met. They were then duty bound under the law to approve the request. They did not have a choice. I understand that people might not like their decision, but those people on the board had to make that decision because that's what their job is. Likewise, it's the same standard here. The only difference is you don't get to look at more information than the Planning Commission did, which is what the opposition here, the appellant, is trying to attempt to do. I get their reasoning. I understand where they come from. If they probably had legal counsel, they probably would have said you can't do that. The issue we have, though, is that that's mostly what they've brought up is concerns that should have been brought up before. Again, it probably wouldn't have changed what was happening. It probably wouldn't have changed the decision. But this is a form over function issue. Procedurally, they did not consider what was, or the Planning Commission did not consider what wasn't in the record. They considered what was in the record. But let me talk about a couple of those issues, even if they were on the record. This is the Bureau versus City of Midland case. It states that courts consider factors including the property's unsuitability for residential purposes, lack of market for said property for use for residential purposes, and high traffic volumes and adjacent business uses. That is in the context of establishing the reasonableness of the approval for commercial property. And that is spot on here. This is a contaminated site. The activities would have to be done on this property to prohibit vapor intrusion with the soils for residential use, make it essentially unable to be done. The standard for EGLE is a prudent, not a possibility. It has to be a reasonably prudent activity. It would not be prudent to do what would be required to make that a clean residential property. It is not prudent to do it. It's not that it's not possible. But a lot of things aren't possible, or are possible that aren't done. So we have, just like in that case, the unsuitability for residential purposes. We also have the lack of market for said property for such use, because it just simply can't be done and probably shouldn't be done. And likewise, there's high volume traffic and adjacent business use. Spot on with the Michigan Supreme Court case, which are all published and are all binding. I could go on about it, but the point being, the decision made by this planning commission or the city's planning commission was proper. The statements in my client's application are conclusory statements in the sense they conclude based on the information they provided, that it's, harmonious, things like this. It's in the context that it must be viewed in Michigan, that it's compatible in the context of the zoning that's allowed, the neighboring properties that are allowed, the current conditions that are there, and within the context of the current approved uses, whether they're permitted or special, if those are operating in the reasonable, normal manner, is that operating in that reasonable and normal manner? There is deference to the developer that gets approval under language in an ordinance that says that use is allowed. It is prima facie de facto considered that the legislative body, being the planning commission who drafts, and the legislative body, the city council who approved the zoning ordinance, that they contemplate the fact that you're going to have a mix of uses. In fact, much of the zoning ordinance speaks to that mix of uses. It's deemed on its face compatible, so long as it meets the criterion of the ordinance. It's precisely what we have here. So, in closing, I guess I made it shorter than I expected. So, in closing, their statements about the concerns they have much are conjecture. They just simply are. I'm not trying to be rude. It just simply is conjecture. The information that's allegedly empirical that they've provided, this data on the environmentals, which is not within the purview of the Planning Commission nor the ZBA, it is exclusively preempted by EGLE, isn't site-specific. That's the criterion you would have anyway, a site-specific criterion, and site-specific standards about the actual contaminants, the actual impacts. How that looks when you have an objective party that brings in that, they bring in experts and engineers with reports that counter the information provided by someone like Christ. That's what's required. I don't make the rules. That's what's required. So with that, I'd ask that this ZBA do what I believe is the only option they have under the law, and that is to affirm the decision by the Planning Commission. Whether you like it or not, that is the sole process in which the ZBA can and should review this application tonight. So I appreciate your time. Sorry for going on, and I appreciate your review. Thank you. Is there any questions?
Any questions?
Yeah, this might not fall under your purview because it might be state, but with the tanks to reduce water going into the storm drainage, it says it reduces it. Do you know how much it reduces it by?
No, the requirement that under NAREPA is that it reduce. EGLE will have to look at a full plan, and they will not look at a plan until it's been fully approved. So we can't really even submit the full plan to them for review.
So you
They,
don't know.
no,
Okay.
we know that it has to. We can't give you the qualitative number on that. Again, the permit will be provided to the department when we seek our land use permit. They'll see that we can go forward. EGLE would review that. And I will just say this. EGLE has a lot of standard activity criterion. In a situation like this, they typically go to the site and they may have specific site criterion as well, because there's always characteristics that are unique and dynamic where they may have additional mitigative activities, monitoring activities that are going to be in place. So it is outside the purview of the Planning Commission in that sense, but that information will be provided as part of the permit request to the department when we would seek our land use permit.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you. Okay, at this time, we will now open the public hearing. If there is anyone who wishes to speak, please come forward, state your name and address for the record. You will have 5 minutes. We ask that if there's redundancy, we try to reduce that. Hopefully, everyone won't come up and say the same thing, especially in light of the hour. But certainly feel free to come up and talk, and you have 5 minutes. We will open the hearing.
Hello, my name is Joseph Carrion. I live on 109 North Arnold Street. A little background about myself. I have applied to the open seat for the Planning Commission. And although this is a personal statement of mine, all of my findings were done within the guidelines of the MML's Planning Commissioner Handbook. I'm here to address the letter Chris's lawyer sent to the ZBA. I hope all of you were able to read that as well. I want to start by saying I understand what is at stake here. This is a very strong letter. I understand the pressure the Planning Commission was under, and I fully understand the pressure this board is under. The silver lining to this letter is that they gave their entire playbook, which helped me focus on what to look for. I agree that the record showed this gas station was in full compliance during the June 5th meeting and that it should have passed that day. So my goal tonight is to highlight the areas the Planning Commission missed. This project fails to meet objective 1.2, 1.8, and 2.5 of our master plan. Objective 1.2 states, encourage a mix of uses and neighborhood scale business development to serve residential areas to complement the Mission Street and downtown areas. To quote Manuela, this corner has been referred by the community as the gateway to downtown Mount Pleasant, end quote. There is no other property that needs to complement our downtown more than this property. Nothing about this gas station is neighborhood scaled and none of it complements our downtown. The next objective that this project fails to meet is objective 1.8, which states enable adaptive reuse of structures to preserve historic buildings, particularly within the downtown. Require new structures to be of similar quality to existing structures and designed to easily be used for multiple purposes. And that ending is what I want to highlight, which is designed to be easily used for multiple purposes. So we've clearly labeled this area as mixed use in our future transportation plan map, which is on book 2 of our master plan, which we have defined to need this adaptive reuse. So if this business fails, which I hope it doesn't, what can it be used for next? Another gas station? The reality is the gas station holds little to no adaptive reuse, thus failing this objective. And finally, objective 2.5 states approve wayfinding between neighborhoods, districts, and parks in and around the city. Now, I understand this gas station has no responsibility for creating this wayfinding signage. However, the digital signage that this gas station is building on the corner of Pickard and Main directly opposes proper wayfinding etiquette. The Planning Commission failed to understand how this digital sign will hurt any wayfinding signage we choose to put here in the future. In summary, this project is hurting our progress to meet our vision of Mount Pleasant per our master plan. So like I said at the beginning, I truly understand the pressure this board is under, but we do have a fight here. And to quote the infamous Facebook post, is it enough? We'll soon find out. And I want to make it clear that I don't hate Chris. And in fact, I applaud their successful efforts in helping lower the cost of gas in our city. And I really want them to be successful. but Chris did make the mistake of picking a piece of property that had 3 extra objectives that could have easily been avoided if they chose to build on a different location. With that being said, I think it would be in your best interest to read that letter tonight. I hope the people here tonight listen fully to everything in that letter and understand that their concerns aren't being ignored tonight. In fact, that letter addresses most, if not all, of the concerns brought over tonight. And thank you again for letting me speak on the matter. And I did want to make one correction to the presentation tonight, which was on traffic calming measures that this Chris did not talk about. And so in our master plan, when we discuss traffic calming measures, that is objective 2.1 in our master plan. That only refers to Mission Street. I want to make that very clear to the board members here tonight. So thank you.
My name is Matthew Johnson, and I live at 310 East Palmer Street. I would like to ask you a couple questions, this gentleman right here at the end, sorry.
Just you have 5 minutes.
Okay, when you originally had stated a couple things in there, I wanted to go back, just kind of refresh my memory.
This isn't question and answer.
Okay, not question and answer, okay. Well, needless to say, compatibility was one of the things that you had addressed. And I do believe that Chris does meet compatibility on Main Street and on Pickard, but not on Palmer. And they've left out the pictures. I think I interrupted you in your speech when you were going over what you had there. They gave the elevation for 2 sides, but not the third. Why?
There.
When you showed the pictures, there was only 2.
And again, sir, these comments
Yeah,
cannot,
I know.
are not colloquies with who's up here.
Yes.
Also, to the attorney, he said, let the buyer beware. Basically, when you purchase a property from public auction, you are responsible for the remediation of that property at that said time. So I don't know. I'm not a very good speaker, obviously, but I just thought I would appear and say a few things. I was an appraiser for the state of Michigan. And I know that on every form that I ever filled out for the value of homes, gas stations are an obsolescence. And it would detract from the value of that home, especially if you're right next door to it. I do like the fact that Chris is a good gas station, and I don't have an objection to them remediating the property and perhaps maybe finding another avenue or something where they're not interfering with the opposite street. Maybe they can do some sort of concessions for her property or whatever the case may be. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Christine Coots. I live at 516 East Broadway Street in Mount Pleasant. And I only have one question comment. I don't know if you can or would answer it at this point, but here it is. Has come to my attention that at some point during the planning commission stage of this whole thing, that the planning commission was threatened with a lawsuit if they did not approve the whole shebang. I don't know if that is true or not true. I can see that, being a real reason if people feel under duress. So that's my only comment. I find it would be nice to know the answer to that, if ever. Thank you.
David, could you ask him to form a lineup here?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, in the spirit of time, if you plan to speak, if you could maybe form a line so we can keep things moving, that would be great.
My name is Garrett Seeloff. I live at 604 North Main Street. So I just left the Coast Guard recently then too. So this is the town my wife and I chose to settle into to raise our two young toddlers. We have loved the town. Absolutely. It's been a really wonderful place to live then too. And what we appreciate about it then is that it has a larger goal in mind. I mean, the town just hired a sustainability coordinator, right? So it seems rather backwards, the perspective of what Mount Pleasant is trying to achieve. And we're trying to, allow this mixed use zone to go towards a gas station. That just doesn't quite align with what the future goals of this town are. Also, in addition to that, when we look at just water runoff then too, we have a river right in that area. And I got a master's degree in water policy. I'm not just some know nothing about it then too. I'm well educated in the environmental sciences then too. And it's an absolute hazard. It's an absolute risk of having an area right there with a gas station next to it then too, which will drain water off into it. And, you know, I worked with some very close friends of mine in the Coast Guard who did deal with the BPA oil spill down in the Gulf of Mexico. And what is so funny about that is that it all happened because of mechanical failures, right? There were safety measures put into place, but a larger corporation wasn't being mindful of actually keeping those safety measures up to date then too, right? Penny pinching and such then. And so we had this massive oil spill, as we all saw, right in that area. And who's to say we're not going to experience something like that within our own neighborhood, right? Now, I understand the economics of it all then too, and we can't just say a business can't operate in a certain area then because we just don't like it, right? But let's also look at how it is a mixed use region. It's like, I feel like we're fitting a square into a round hole. And I just don't see why, Chris, the gas station can't just move a few blocks in the direction then too, where we have more industrial zoning for that region then too. This is a neighborhood. I have a toddler, my son and I, year and a half year old, him and I go biking through those neighborhoods. It's quiet. There's barely any cars going through them in the early morning then too. It's really peaceful in a way where I can sort of forget about the stuff I had to deal with in the Coast Guard, right? It's just soothing. And to think that we're going to increase traffic in that area then too for, you know, for a gas station, of all things, why don't we think about the other initiatives we had within the master plan? I think housing was one of them, right? And that's something we can consider, right? As to what that town, what would better meet that corner area then too, as you're entering into the town. Something that was perhaps senior assisted living centers then too, or areas for college students then to rent out in that region, right? There's options, there's solutions to it. I also just want to maybe touch back to our friend here then on the Chris side. We had a member who was a lawyer from Traverse City who came over here painting the previous members of the community then as not having standing, right? And that just, you know, it made me smirk a little bit because it's community members living right next to the gas station, an out-of-town lawyer saying that they don't have standing in this zone of boarding appeals. And there's just something sort of at odds with that image then, because they absolutely have standing. They're right next to it. They're right next to all of that vapor, that gas, that smell, the contaminants that leach over from that field, that area. That's absolutely reason to try to make a statement and reverse something that shouldn't be happening, right? And that's why we have the zone of appeals, right? We're a governing body, a decision was made from the planning commission, and we're rethinking it. We're considering have all the I's been dotted and T's crossed, right? That's why we have an appeals board. And I appreciate we're looking at this then as a community, and that we even had members then who did sign in to get a stopgap measure then, so we can look at the full spectrum of things. And this isn't some narrative they're painting, right? I think the lawyer himself then also had a narrative he wanted to paint then too. Yes, there are two narratives we're looking at then, right? It's not as if one was made up by a bunch of folks who didn't know what they were talking about. No, they were citing articles. They had information. They're not structural engineers, right? And it takes money and time. Chris clearly has money and time to spend towards getting structural engineers and lawyers from out of town to come in and try to fight this battle then too, while some other members here of the community have to self-organize and self-educate on these topics and matters then too. It's not a fair fight in that same regard. There's a discrepancy in what is even a fair fight in that regard. And so I don't think that they should.
5 minutes.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Hi, my name is Ginny Haight, and I live at 410 West Broadway here in Mount Pleasant. The commissioner that asked about the standards of remediation, I really appreciate that question. And to what degree would they be able to remediate? And we were told that they don't have to have that information until they talk to Eagle about that. And my concern is that, so if Eagle tells them they have to have 80%, can they do that? And can they tell us how they will remediate to 80%? And if, Eagle only wants 10% or whatever, then that's out of our hands. But I really think that Chris should be able to tell us how they can remediate up to certain standards. So let's say they don't know, or I guess they maybe should know what the standard is that Eagle would want for that area. And he said there were some specifics, but I would think that they would have a general idea of how much Eagle would want them to remediate to. And so I would hope that they have a plan, and I would think that they should be able to tell us that if Eagle says we need to remediate 50%, then this is our plan to remediate up to 50%. And if Eagle tells us it has to be 75%, this is our plan. And they should have these plans to be able to tell you how they will remediate to some specific percentages. And then when Eagle tells them, well, it will be 80%, then they say, yes, we have this plan for 75. We just have to do this to bring it up to 80% or whatever that is. So I really appreciated your question on that. The other gentleman that just spoke sparked something in my mind. And so this is just a suggestion to Chris, is you see the reaction, the community reaction to what's happening. I think the gentleman said, perhaps they could find another place. Well, and again, as a large corporation, and I don't know how large Christ is, but you have a lot of gas stations. I think this will be your third gas station here in town, if I'm right. You have one on the south end, one on the north end. And that's great. And you have brought gas prices down. And so we do appreciate that. I think what a wonderful thing that you might want to do for this community is to do some philanthropic work. Remediate the property. Let everybody know that you are remediating the property. Choose another site for your gas station. And now you can support maybe some housing for lower income people, or something. We could name it a Christ nursing home, or we could name it the Christ Senior Community, because we all know that naming rights are there. So I challenge you to think about that. Remediate the property. We would be very happy that you did that. Sell it to somebody, then to the city or to whatever that could be done, and people would be very grateful. You could name it, and I think that would go a lot towards some good faith in this community. So thank you.
Hello, I'm Gary Kramer.
I also live at 410 West Broadway in Mount Pleasant. Yeah, I would say just a couple things. I would say to be careful to the zoning board, not to feel like you have to be a rubber stamp for this petition. You know, what the lawyer said, you know, may be accurate, that maybe, you know, all these standards are met, the letter of the law. But, you know, there's also people that live there. And if we're just going to vote on the letter of the law, it's also a dangerous situation as well, potentially. So, and I reiterate, you know, what my wife said, you know, Chris has done some good things in this community, and I've noticed a drop in prices. I assume that's what has happened. But I would also ask you to consider this neighborhood and what the attorney, you know, said. I'm sorry, I don't remember your name, but you know, you had a lot of empathy as well, you know, for the neighborhood. Although you're saying you're following the standards, you know, what was done for the planning commission can't be overdone by the zoning commission, all these rules and laws, but there's also a humanity issue here. So I would wish, you know, maybe something else could be worked out. Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Seeing no one?
Anyone online, Brian?
Anyone online? Haley?
Pardon? Okay. I will close the public hearing. Mr. Kench, is there any correspondence to share?
Yep, you have a letter dated from Jeannie Haight, I believe, 410 West Broadway Street, apartment 301, dated July 15th, 2025. Opposed to the request. You have the letter there that you can review. We have an email that was sent in on September 11th, 2025. Gonna make sure I got the right. Kathleen Martin. This is the email on Kathleen Martin regarding I put potential conflict of interest. You have a copy of that. I have a voicemail that was left by Carol Horman on 9/18/2025. Acknowledging that she lives next door. They had an issue with apparently an individual that we had to call the Department of Public Safety out to address that. Greg and Margaret Travis, located at 522 North Fancher Avenue, rather, 101025. You have a copy of the letter there as well. Post to this request. The letter, or an email rather, from Norma Bailey dated October 21st, lives at 222 East Andre Avenue. End note.
I think I can hear you.
Can you hear me now? Okay. I have an email from and I'm sorry, I'm looking at an email, so there's a lot of text here from Norma Bailey, dated 10/21/25, as posed, doesn't believe that another gas station is needed at that location. And that's what I have.
Okay, thank you. We'll say that this is contrary to, I'm taught to do things, but do we have discussion?
Yeah, let me start that off. Over the last 40 years, I've served 3 tours on the planning commission and 4 tours on the zoning board. So I do know how the process works and how it's supposed to work. And I appreciate both sides and everybody trying to do the best thing for the city in quality of life, in economics, in doing away with dilapidation. I really do appreciate that. Having said that, I have 4 takeaways from what everybody has contributed to tonight. First of all, just to clarify, Quest is not requesting a variance from us. It's simply an affirmation of the Planning Commission decision. It's not a variance because the Planning Commission granted things that would otherwise have had to come before us as a variance. So anything about variances do not apply. Secondly, the zoning ordinance is the legal determiner here. The master plan is aspirational. It's aspirational. It's where we'd like to be. It's not necessarily where we are. And in fact, decisions, commentary, community input on master plans can and does stimulate zoning ordinance change. Number 3, we did have last month a review of the master plan. And that would have been the perfect time to bring up all the wonderful and detailed and substantive research that has been presented to us tonight. Unfortunately for us, that is wasted because that's not within our purview. It wasn't utilized where it should be utilized for maximum impact. And I would encourage you to bring that material to the Planning Commission, to subsequent master plan reviews, so that some of that perhaps can be worked into the ordinance. The ZBA can't change the ordinance. The ZBA can't make changes to the master plan. Those changes should be requested to go to the Planning Commission. Thank you.
Anyone else? Do I have a motion?
Remember, all motions here need to be in the positive. I would
I'm sorry,
move.
I'll do that.
Oh,
Excuse me. Yeah, all motions have to be in the positive. It does not necessarily indicate that the person making the motion is in favor. We just have to state motions in the affirmative.
So in light of that structural requirement, I would move that the ZBA affirm the Planning Commission's decision in regard to this particular case.
Do I have support?
I second that.
We have a motion and support. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
We have, okay, the ayes have it.
Could we go back and just do a roll call, please, for the record?
Sure.
Thanks.
Nay.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. We'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Housekeeping.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm looking at your script. What?
I think we'll do other business and new business.
Yeah, old business, new business.
Okay, yeah, I was just looking at your script. Okay, old business?
Have anything to report on? I don't have anything to report on old business. As far as new business, currently, we don't have any cases coming before the board that we would schedule for next month, but I do want to have a short meeting so that we can review our minutes, get those approved, and then I'd also like to review and adopt our schedule for 2026. So it should be a shorter meeting.
And that meeting will be,
That meeting is on the 19th, is it?
I believe so, yeah, because we move it back because of
Yeah, for the
Thanksgiving.
holidays.
Yeah.
Yeah,
19th of November.
19th of November. Yep.
Okay,
And with that, I think that's it.
Okay, anything else?
there's something else on here.
No, we were gonna do recognitions and I postponed that until we had a little glitch in our plaques.
Oh,
We'll wait
okay.
till next month.
Next month, great,
All right.
right.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
There we go. Jump on it. Jump on it.
You made the
Sure,
motion to
yes.
adjourn?
I second that.
Okay, meeting is adjourned.
Yeah, I don't want me to stay up this.
It's my
late.
first.
Yeah, me either. Fortunately, the Leafs were playing tonight, so.
So I don't, ended up with two of these, so.
Okay.
That ended up.
Okay,
Well,
No, I'll change it.
yeah.
A lot brighter in there than.
Heck, yeah.
nice to meet you, new members.
Nice to meet you.
Great. Well, just great. Okay. Yes, sir.
You are fantastic.
Thank you. What, 48 years.
48 I just said, communication for 40 years.
Yeah.
You ought to be able to talk.